Chapter 1354. Xiaohua's heart was restless. He wanted to hide behind a block of ice to avoid the iceworm's attack, but he suddenly felt a scorching aura above his head. When he raised his head to look, he couldn't help but be shocked. One of the red flying insects in front of the iceworm had unknowingly flown above his head. The red flying insect's black and red eyes were staring straight at Xiaohua. Although Xiaohua couldn't look directly at it like a human, he knew that the flying insect had already discovered him. Immediately after, a buzzing sound entered Xiaohua's ears. When he turned his head to look, a group of iceworms were flying towards the depression he was in. Xiaohua suddenly realized that the scorching heat emitted by the unknown flying insect must have attracted the iceworms. But were these unknown flying insects also iceworms? He didn't seem to have heard Li Xiaowen mention them. Xiaohua thought in his heart, but he didn't dare to be negligent. Just now, he had already seen the strange state of the iceworms when they collided with Fu Shu's body. Moreover, Li Xiaowen and the other fourth-layer qi refining cultivators were very afraid, so he didn't dare to let the iceworms get close to him. Xiaohua's eyes swept over, and he urged his transcendence energy. His figure quickly flew to the side. At this time he didn't dare to hold back. His flying speed was several times faster than an 11th-layer qi refining cultivator. Xiaohua didn't move, but the moment he moved, he was immediately discovered by the iceworms. A portion of the iceworms that were originally flying towards the red flying insect also split up and chased after Xiaohua. However, this was only a matter of a moment. Just as Xiaohua flew away, the red flying insect above his head unexpectedly didn't plan on letting him go. It also flapped its membrane-like wings and flew out after Xiaohua's figure. Its speed was unexpectedly not slower than Xiaohua's, and just as the iceworms split up a bit, they immediately merged back into one and chased after Xiaohua. As Xiaohua flew into the valley, he stole glances behind him. He had already seen the situation of the iceworm and the red flying insect. He was slightly alarmed. He had always been confident in his flying speed, but he didn't expect the iceworm and the unknown flying insect to be no slower than him. Looking into the distance, Fu Shu, Fan Daomao, and company were in an even worse state. They kept casting fireball charms in their hands, hoping to use fireballs to block the iceworm's attack. This is bad. Although such a large movement can block the iceworms behind it, and even exterminate some of them, but there can't be only so few iceworms in the southern color plains, right? If they attracted a large wave of iceworms, how could they pass through this valley? If I were to escape with them, I'm afraid it would be even more dangerous, right? Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization. He originally wanted to fly to the side of the crowd, but his figure unconsciously stopped. Pa! An iceworm flying at the front bumped into the brilliance of Xiaohua's weak water talisman. Just like what Xiaohua saw a moment ago, the brilliance immediately turned into ice. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. He quickly turned and flew in another direction. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and touched the ice on his body. That ice was different from ordinary ice. It was extremely cold to the touch. Moreover, it was hard, almost as hard as a rock. Xiaohua frowned. He exerted strength in his hand, wanting to crush that ice. However, that ice was slippery and unexpectedly didn't have any effect. Xiaohua pinched it a few times, but it didn't have any effect. In a hurry, Xiaohua took out the magic spear tip from his space without hesitation. He didn't dare to use the spear tip to face himself. Instead, he used the back of the spear tip and used all his strength to hit the ice. Gotcha! The ice was shattered. However, it wasn't only the ice that was shattered. The layer of weak water talisman on Xiaohua's body flickered a few times and was also broken at the same time. This Xiaohua was somewhat depressed. He thought, if I used the weak water talisman to protect my body, I would be turned into ice after being hit by the iceworm. However, if I didn't protect my body, wouldn't my body be frozen into ice after being hit? Should I try the iron cloak talisman? While thinking, he patted his storage pouch and took out another iron cloak talisman. However, he still didn't dare to stop. He flew while thinking. Fortunately, his flying speed was fast enough. Although the iceworm and the unknown flying insect were following closely behind him, Xiaohua's vigilant shuttling back and forth and constantly changing directions made him seem to be somewhat at ease. He was in a much better situation than Fu Shu and the others. Pa! Another sound rang out. An ice worm took advantage of the moment when Xiaohua was turning and hit him. As Xiaohua expected, the iron cloak talisman also couldn't stop the ice worm. At the place where the ice worm hit, the brilliance also turned into ice. And I understand. As long as it's spiritual chi of heaven and earth, no matter what attribute it is, as long as the ice worm hits it, it will turn into ice. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth will also turn into ice. Xiaohua was slightly alarmed. He knew that all the defensive yellow talismans in his storage pouch wouldn't be of much use. Perhaps only the fireball talisman would be useful. However, just as Xiaohua was about to take out the fireball talisman, he discovered another strange thing. That unknown red flying insect was flying extremely fast, even faster than Xiaohua by a bit. However, this red flying insect only followed behind Xiaohua and didn't crash into Xiaohua's body. Instead, it was the ice insect that was slower than the red flying insect that was scrambling to catch up to Xiaohua, looking for an opportunity to crash into Xiaohua's body. Why is that? Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. Could it be that this flying insect is the ice worm's commander? Doesn't it do its own work? While thinking, Xiaohua's mind turned. He changed the fireball talisman in his hand to a confinement talisman. He used his magic power to cover the red flying insect. The red flying insect was also very alert. Without waiting for the confinement talisman to get close, it immediately flew downwards and dodged it in the blink of an eye. On the contrary, the ice worms behind it couldn't dodge in time, and were trapped by the confinement talisman. What made Xiaohua even more surprised was that when the ice worms were hit by the confinement talisman, their wings stopped moving. Their antennae also stopped moving. Then like ice grains they fell straight down. Little thing. I don't believe that I can't kill you. Xiaohua used the corner of his eye to glance at the red flying insect that had just dodged his confinement talisman and was following behind him again. His heart became ruthless. With a shake of his hand, he took out 4 to 5 confinement talismans from the space. His body suddenly flew up. The red flying insect also paused for a moment before flying up as well. At this moment, Xiaohua shook his hand and several confinement talismans flew out, trapping the red flying insect from all directions. The red flying insect rushed left and right, but in the end, it couldn't dodge Xiaohua's confinement talismans. With a flash of light, the red flying insect was actually hit by several confinement talismans. Its wings struggled a few times, and just like the ice worm just now, it directly fell from the sky. Haha, Xiaohua was overjoyed when he saw this. He increased his speed and flew forward. Sure enough, when the red flying insect fell, a portion of the ice worms that were chasing after Xiaohua immediately separated and chased after the red flying insect. Why does it feel a little strange? After Xiaohua finished laughing, a trace of suspicion appeared in his heart. However, before he could think about it carefully, a sharp and urgent sound came from the distant valley. That sound was both loud and urgent, as if it wanted to pierce his ears. Following the sound, the several red flying insects that had scattered in all directions just now, as if they had received some kind of order, all changed directions and chased after Xiaohua. This was serious. Of the large group of ice worms that appeared just now, about 40% went out to chase after Li Xiaowen and the others. The remaining 60% followed behind the red flying insects. Now that the red flying insects were chasing after Xiaohua, wouldn't that mean that 60% of the ice worms were also chasing after him? Moreover, other than the group of ice worms that was chasing after Xiaohua, the other red flying insects were actually blocking Xiaohua from different directions. Are you kidding me? Xiaohua was a little dumbfounded. He had originally planned to let Li Xiaowen and the others lead the ice worms away. Who would have thought that in the end he would actually be the one to lead so many ice worms away? Xiaohua whistled, and a trace of excitement appeared in his nervous heart. Xiaohua's figure could be seen flying back and forth amidst the encirclement of many red flying insects. At the beginning, Xiaohua was still a little unfamiliar with it. After being hit by several ice worms, a large piece of the iron cloak talisman was turned into ice. However, Xiaohua was not in a hurry. He did not immediately take out the spear tip. He wanted to wait until the ice had reached a certain degree before breaking it. Just like this, Xiaohua flew in a different direction from the others. He gradually approached the bottom of the valley, and this kind of flying made Xiaohua more and more proficient, more and more comfortable, more and more at ease. What's with that sound just now? How did it come out? It seems to be able to control the red flying insects. Could it be that I was wrong? Once Xiaohua was free, his thoughts turned rapidly. He began to think about that inexplicable sound. It seems, the first time I was discovered by the ice worms, there was also this kind of sound. Moreover, if it wasn't for that sound, Li Xiaowen and the others might not have been discovered. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua began to pay attention to the pitch-black bottom of the valley. However, the bottom of the valley was very deep. At night, it was impossible to see clearly. Xiaohua's cultivation was insufficient, so he did not dare to go down. He could only be cautious. At the same time, Xiaohua secretly took out a pile of fireball talismans and confinement talismans from the space. He placed the fireball talisman in his left hand and held the confinement talisman in his right hand. Just like before, after flying for a while, he saw that he was free. With a shake of his hand, several confinement talismans were thrown out. Those red flying insects were admittedly agile, but after all, they could not compare to humans. After doing this several times, there would always be one flying insect that was hit by the confinement talisman and fell from the sky. When the flying insect fell, it also took some ice worms with it. Just after Xiaohua hit 3 more red flying insects, finally, from below Xiaohua, a furious voice sounded. Where did this wild cultivator come from? You actually dare to hurt my fire mushroom insect. Xiaohua was overjoyed when he heard this. He shouted, This young master has been waiting for you. You actually dared to plot against this young master. I'll let you see how powerful this young master is. As he spoke, he did not even look. With a shake of his left hand, more than 10 fireball talismans were activated by magic power. Like hailstones, they shot towards the source of the voice. Chapter 1355. Rumble. With a burst of chaotic sounds, more than 10 fireball talismans exploded under Xiaohua's body, creating a field of fire. The swarm of ice worms was attracted by the flames of the fireball talismans. Unexpectedly, most of the ice worms abandoned Xiaohua and flew towards the bottom of the valley. Xiaohua took the opportunity to fly away for a moment. With a wave of his hand, he threw out several confinement talismans, imprisoning the last few so-called firebugs. One by one, the firebugs fell to the bottom of the valley. Then, in a spurt of energy, Xiaohua threw out several fireball talismans, surrounding the few remaining ice worms. Rumble. With a few explosions, many of them were eliminated. Xiaohua had caused such a big commotion, so it naturally attracted the attention of Fu Shu and the others. When they saw the flames around Xiaohua, they all had the same thought as Xiaohua. They urged their magic power and activated their flight talismans. While using fireball talismans and other fire attribute yellow talismans to expel the ice worms, they also tried their best to fly out of the valley. They thought that the further away they were from this place, the safer it would be. Xiaohua coldly looked at the bottom of the valley. He took out a flight talisman from his space and stuck it on his body. Just as he was about to activate it, a black shadow flew out from the bottom of the valley with a whoosh. Its body was still emitting some flames and black smoke. When the black shadow flew close to Xiaohua, Xiaohua could clearly see that it was a cultivator around the 7th level of qi refining. He had a short and stout figure. Originally, he was wearing a neat and tidy Taoist robe, but at this moment, a lot of it had been damaged by the fire. His face was originally plump and his eyebrows were also thick. At this moment, one of his eyebrows was gone, and the other half was still intact. That cultivator stopped in the air and didn't answer. He patted the storage pouch on his waist and took out several yellow talismans. He stuck them on his body, and several water blue lights flashed. Only then did the flickering flames barely extinguish. Looking at the cultivator whose hair was burned, Xiaohua almost wanted to hold his stomach and laugh out loud. Forcefully holding back his laughter, Xiaohua coldly said, "Who is fellow Taoist? You actually drove the ice worms to attack I?" "Humph, The cultivator coldly snorted and slapped his hand. It was the other black pouch on his waist. A pigeon-shaped object flew out from the pouch. The pigeon-shaped object flew in the air and gently circled. The cultivator let out a strange sound from his mouth. It was different from before. When the pigeon-shaped object heard the sound, it flapped its wings twice. A strange light flashed through its eyes. Xiaohua immediately felt like he was being watched. What is this? Xiaohua looked at the pigeon, and then looked at the black pouch on the cultivator's waist. He was quite puzzled. The pigeon glanced at Xiaohua, flapped its wings, and flew over like lightning. Xiaohua was shocked. He didn't understand what this pigeon was, but since it dared to fly over, it naturally had some tricks up its sleeve. He didn't have any countermeasures, so he clapped his hands and took out several confinement talismans, throwing them at the pigeon. Unexpectedly, the pigeon was very agile. Not only did it not retreat, it actually shuttled back and forth within the range of the confinement talismans, dodging all the yellow talismans. Good heavens, it's so powerful! Xiaohua was somewhat flabbergasted. He didn't have time to take out any yellow talismans from his storage pouch or space. His figure flashed and flew towards the bottom of the valley where the fireball talisman exploded. Needless to say, the pigeon was also closely chasing behind him. Moreover, the pigeon's speed was clearly faster than Xiaohua's. It caught up to Xiaohua in a few breaths of time. Then, without waiting for Xiaohua to turn around, the pigeon crashed into Xiaohua's back with a bang. The ice that was frozen by the ice worms was immediately shattered by the pigeon's crash. Xiaohua also felt a huge force on his back, and his figure unconsciously swayed. This pigeon actually used its body to attack. Xiaohua only now realized. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He used another iron cloak talisman on his body, and his figure continued to fly downwards. When he was about to reach the bottom of the valley, the ice worms at the place where the fireball talisman exploded had already collided with the non-existent fireballs. With Xiaohua's appearance, the ice worms had a new target. They spread their wings and rushed towards Xiaohua. Seeing this, Xiaohua knew that he had achieved his goal. He didn't stop and turned around, flying towards the sky again. At the same time, Xiaohua waved his hand and took out the devil spear point from the space. He secretly held it and rushed towards the pigeon. Xiaohua flew fast, but the pigeon flew even faster. In the blink of an eye, the two collided. Xiaohua's eyes narrowed. He looked at where the pigeon came from and thrust his spear forward. Poof! The pigeon that was as fast as lightning stopped in front of Xiaohua's hand. The devil spear point in Xiaohua's hand pierced the pigeon's hard as stone head. As soon as the devil spear point entered the pigeon's head, a thin black thread immediately sprayed out from the devil spear point. It quickly circled around the pigeon's body, and then retracted back into the devil spear point. That ferocious pigeon from a moment ago was no longer breathing. Fei Qing, on top of Xiaohua's head, the short and fat cultivator who had been coldly watching Xiaohua's actions all this time suddenly paled. A trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth as he cried out in grief. Humph! When Xiaohua heard this, he shook his hand. That so-called Fei Qing's corpse fell from the sky, and fell to the bottom of the valley where the faint light of the flames flickered. It disappeared without a trace. Urgently, Xiaohua didn't seem to give that cultivator any time to react. He shook his hand again and a dozen fireball talismans flew out. Xiaohua could casually refine these things since he had a lot of them in the space. He wasn't stingy at all. Admittedly, Xiaohua didn't have divine sense and couldn't control the fireball talismans very well. However, the fireball talismans won in terms of quantity. In an instant, they enveloped the cultivator's surroundings. The short and fat cultivator clearly didn't expect Xiaohua to be able to take out so many high-grade fireball talismans. A trace of panic appeared on his deathly pale face. At the same time his figure rapidly flew back, he also took out all kinds of yellow talismans. In a flurry he used them on his body to block the incoming fireballs. Bang! 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 A series of explosions rang out with a world-shaking momentum. Although the southern color plane was extremely cold, and the spiritual chi of heaven and earth wasn't much, the fireball talismans Xiaohua refined were still very powerful. They blasted that 7th layer chi refining cultivator, until he could only retreat without any ability to counterattack. When Xiaohua saw this, he sneered. He looked at the ice worms under his feet that were already swarming towards the fireball talismans. His figure flashed and circled around that cultivator, preparing to chase after Li Xiaowen and the others who were already out of sight. As soon as Xiaohua flew away, the short and fat cultivator was in a miserable state. He had just been blasted back several meters by the exploding fireball talismans. When he stabilized his body, the already tattered Taoist robe on his body became even more tattered. Before he could take out a new Taoist robe from his storage pouch, a large group of ice worms swarmed over from the bottom of the valley. Pei, the short and fat cultivator fiercely spat out a mouthful of saliva. His figure quickly flew towards the nearest stone wall. The ice worms naturally followed closely behind. Xiaohua flew along the other side of the stone wall, while carefully observing. When the short and fat cultivator landed on a protruding part of the stone wall, something happened that made Xiaohua flabbergasted. He saw that cultivator pat his storage pouch and take out a palm-sized triangle. Soon after, he quickly took out a yellow talisman and stuck it on his hand. He used his hand to point at the triangular object. An earthy yellow brilliance rushed out from the triangle and directly covered the cultivator's body. Suddenly, a layer of rock-like things appeared around the cultivator's body. In the blink of an eye, the cultivator was completely covered. That cultivator actually turned into a rock. The swarm of ice worms flew to the side of the rock and circled around a few times. They didn't stop and flew towards Xiaohua's direction. Magic tool. When Xiaohua saw this, he sighed in his heart and almost cried out in alarm. He didn't quite understand. It was said that this magic tool could only be used after one had divine sense. This short and fat cultivator's cultivation was only around the 7th layer of qi refining. How could he use a magic tool? Moreover, what was that pitch-black pouch on the cultivator's waist? What feiqing could actually fly out from it? Seeing that the ice worms were flying towards him, Xiaohua wasn't too nervous. His flying speed was about the same as the ice worms. As long as he threw out a fireball talisman, it would naturally attract the ice worms to one side, and he would be able to calmly escape. But when Xiaohua's heart relaxed a little, his gaze swept past the stone wall beside him. There was also a protrusion there, and there was also a piece of rock on top of the protrusion. It can't be someone who was with that cultivator, right? Just as this thought arose in Xiaohua's heart, the rock suddenly moved. A cultivator who looked similar to the short and fat cultivator from before appeared from the cover. Without saying anything, he threw a yellow talisman at Xiaohua's face. That talisman was the commonly seen confinement talisman. After it hit Xiaohua's body, Xiaohua's entire body was tightly confined and he couldn't move in the slightest. Just like the ice worms from before, he fell straight to the bottom of the valley. If he fell from such a high height, he would definitely end up in a bloody mess. There was no other possibility. Therefore, after the cultivator threw out the confinement talisman and saw Xiaohua fall, he didn't chase after him. He glanced at the ice worms that were already flying close and crouched down. Using some unknown method, his entire body turned into a rock, looking exactly like the cultivator in front of him. However, just as that cultivator turned into a rock, a figure suddenly flew out from under the stone wall. With lightning speed, he stretched out his hand and a jet-black brilliance followed that person's hand and quietly pierced into the rock. Ah! A blood-curdling scream sounded from the rock. The entire rock gradually transformed into a short and fat cultivator. That cultivator lowered his head and looked at the black spear point in his chest in disbelief. That spear point had already pierced deeply into his chest, but there wasn't a trace of blood around the spear point. Soon after, that cultivator's gaze fell on Xiaohua, who had broken free from the confinement talisman, and immediately flew up the stone wall to attack him. Chapter 1356. That cultivator really couldn't figure out how this rogue cultivator, who was only at the 2nd level of qi condensation, managed to break free from the confinement talisman. Even more so, he couldn't believe that the spear tip in this rogue cultivator's hand actually possessed unparalleled strength. Not only did it penetrate his defense, it even shattered the restriction on his Taoist robe, causing him, a 7th level qi condensation cultivator, to unexpectedly die in the hands of a rogue cultivator at the second level of chi condensation. The devil's spear pierced the cultivator's chest. Similarly, a black thread flashed by, extinguishing the cultivator's life force. Immediately after, without waiting for Xiaohua to withdraw his hand, a series of pa-pa-pa sounds rang out. The iceworms flying at the front had already collided with Xiaohua's body. On Xiaohua's back, the brilliance of the weak water talisman gradually solidified. Immediately after, pa-pa-pa-pa-pa sounds rang out continuously. It seemed that in just a split second, Xiaohua's back had turned into a block of ice. Turning his head to look at the hundreds and thousands of iceworms, Xiaohua's heart gave birth to a burst of panic. That panic was like a gale, completely expelling the joy of killing the enemy. Only a single word, as firm as a boulder, remained in his heart: run. Only now did Xiaohua understand why the cultivators of the country of Xi were so afraid of the southern calling, and why they only dared to pass through at night. Just now, hundreds and thousands of iceworms were already enough to make Xiaohua, whose flying speed was close to the 11th level of chi condensation, flustered. If the number was even greater, wouldn't it be strange if he wasn't turned into an icicle by the iceworms? Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. While rapidly chasing after Li Xiaowen and the others, he held the devil spear tip in his hand and struck his own back with it. With a crash, the spear tip smashed the block of ice, and the iron cloak talisman was also broken. Immediately after, Xiaohua stored the devil spear tip into his space and applied an iron cloak talisman to himself. While Xiaohua was running for his life, he didn't forget to look at the cultivator who had just transformed into a rock. As Xiaohua expected, the short and fat cultivator who had just turned into a rock had already heard his junior brother's screams and came out of the rock. At this moment, he was looking at Xiaohua with a sinister expression. However, there were many iceworms between Xiaohua and the cultivator, causing the cultivator to hesitate. When Xiaohua saw that the two of them were wearing the same clothes, and their faces were also the same, he already knew he had a great enmity with this person. Moreover, this person was a 7th layer aura refining cultivator. Compared to him, the difference between them was really too great. If he didn't run now, when would he? Thus, Xiaohua urged his magic power and poured it all into the flying talisman. His whole body was like the wind, flying forward at extreme speed. Behind him, thousands of iceworms also surged and chased after him. When the cultivator saw Xiaohua fly away, a trace of amazement appeared on his face. However, in an instant, it turned into a sneer. Because he had returned to his original form, more than 10 iceworms had turned around to look for him. The cultivator didn't panic. He clenched his teeth, slapped his storage pouch, and took out a somewhat strange yellow talisman. The yellow talisman's color was somewhat faint, and the talisman's runes were already somewhat indistinct. However, when the cultivator held it in his hand, he slightly urged his magic power, and actually drew in a large amount of the surrounding spiritual energy. When the yellow talisman turned into an orange brilliance, the cultivator placed his hand on his shoulder. The brilliance of the yellow talisman flashed and disappeared in a flash, repeatedly rippling around the cultivator's body. The brilliance of the yellow talisman was stable, and a layer of earthy yellow, like a Taoist robe, appeared around the cultivator's body. This earthy yellow film was also very strange. As soon as it appeared, the dozen iceworms seemed to have lost track of the cultivator, and stopped about 1 zhang in front of him. Then the dozen iceworms slightly circled around, spread their wings, and flew away. Seeing the iceworm fly away, the cultivator's face didn't show any joy or anger. He flew up and flew towards the opposite stone wall. At this moment, there was only the corpse of the cultivator killed by Xiaohua's surprise attack. Because the corpse had just died, it was still warm. Most of its body had already been turned into ice by the iceworm. The short and fat cultivator looked around, and his gaze fell on the corpse's waist. There were also 2 different bags of holding there. Fortunately, only a small portion of the 2 bags of holding were sealed in ice. The cultivator didn't hesitate to take the bag of holding and put it on his waist. Then he took out a dark red triangular talisman and activated it with his magic power. The talisman turned into a drop of blood. The cultivator spat out a mouthful of blood essence on the talisman. The talisman lit up like a torch and the light suddenly increased. The cultivator's expression was a bit hesitant, but when his gaze fell on the corpse under his feet, the hesitation disappeared. The cultivator clenched his teeth and hit the light on his chest. When the light entered his chest, the cultivator's face became inexplicably red. Then, the cultivator slapped his bag of holding and took out a shuttle-shaped object. He threw it into the air and formed a strange seal with his hand. The cultivator's face became even redder, and the shuttle-shaped object turned into a shuttle. The short and stout cultivator extended his hand and tossed the corpse on the ground onto the shuttle. He himself also leapt onto the shuttle. Immediately after, under the urging of the cultivator's magic power, the shuttle rapidly chased after Xiaohua. Its speed was actually a fraction faster than Xiaohua's. Xiaohua gathered his magic power and flew out of the valley. His speed was originally a bit faster than the iceworms. Now that he was desperately escaping, he left behind a lot of iceworms. However, after flying for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he still hadn't reached the end of the valley. Instead, 2 different valleys appeared in front of him, each leading to a different place. This is bad. Xiaohua's heart was beating fast. With the speed of Li Xiaowen and the others, they must have just passed by. But if he couldn't find the right direction, wouldn't he be going in the opposite direction? However, this wasn't the time for Xiaohua to hesitate. The entrances of the 2 valleys were the same. He couldn't distinguish anything. Xiaohua only had a thought and flew to the left. Xiaohua followed the iceworms behind him and just entered the valley on the left. The short and fat cultivator's shuttle caught up. The cultivator seemed to be very familiar with the south color plane. Seeing Xiaohua enter the valley on the left, his dark red face showed a trace of pleasant surprise. However, after the pleasant surprise he slightly frowned, as if he was afraid of something. The shuttle under his feet also stopped. The short and fat cultivator's face was gloomy. It was unknown what he was thinking, but he didn't dare to chase into the valley. It seemed like he was making a decision. The cultivator stood in the air like this for no less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea. When the cultivator's eyebrows relaxed, and he was about to take the next step, a series of rumbling sounds came from the valley on the left. Behind the rumbling sounds, there was an even louder sound of tides and waves crashing against the shore. The short and fat cultivator's face showed panic. Just as he was about to urge the shuttle to turn around, another unforgettable figure came out from the valley. Without hesitation, the cultivator slapped his storage bag and took out the triangular magic tool from before. He pointed his finger, and a yellow light flew into the air. It turned into a ring and flew towards the figure. As for Xiaohua, he flew into the valley on the left. As soon as he entered, he felt that the valley was a bit colder than outside. His eyebrows and hair quickly formed some white ice flowers. Could it be that I went the wrong way? Xiaohua was a bit apprehensive. He raised his head and looked around. This valley was the same as the south color plane. The walls were covered in a layer of ice. Occasionally, there would be some white flowers on the ice as well as some strange-looking spirit herbs. At this time, the full moon had already set and the moonlight was dim. Everything in the valley was deathly pale. After flying for a while, the stone walls gradually changed. Many holes appeared. These holes were densely packed and filled the entire stone wall. It looked like the entire stone wall was turning black. Wrong. This is definitely wrong. Xiaohua was a bit alarmed. If this valley was right, I should have caught up with Li Xiaowen and the others. Since I haven't caught up with them, it must be wrong. Thinking about this, Xiaohua wanted to turn around and go back. However, there were still thousands of iceworms chasing him. Xiaohua had no choice but to dive down and try to go around these iceworms. Just as he flew down about 10 feet, an extremely cold and weak divine sense swept over from below him. A foundation establishment cultivator? Xiaohua was shocked. However, he immediately felt that something was wrong. This divine sense was extremely stiff and emotionless. When it swept over him, it was like a block of ice. Could it be Xiaohua didn't dare to think further? At the same time, he didn't dare to fly down anymore. Looking at the iceworms blocking his way, he clenched his teeth and took out a stack of fireball talismans. He shook his hand and threw them out. Rumble! A loud sound rang out. It actually exploded into a blank area. Xiaohua didn't say anything else. He braced himself and wanted to fly away from that blank area. At this moment, with a hua sound, a surge of energy came from below him. An extremely cold aura quickly attacked Xiaohua's surroundings. Run! Xiaohua was shocked. He felt that his body was about to be frozen stiff. He hurriedly rushed out. The cold aura swept over like a wind and spread around the valley. After Xiaohua flew a few feet, he shockingly discovered that ice worms were flying out of the numerous holes in the stone wall. In just a few breaths, the ice worms filled the entire valley. Xiaohua glanced at them. Wasn't there tens of thousands of ice worms? Xiaohua didn't dare to hold anything back. Fireball talismans, fire serpent talismans, fire net talismans, and all the other fire-type talismans were thrown out one after another. A series of rumbling sounds rang out, blasting open a blank area in front of the ice worms. Just as Xiaohua emerged from this blank area, behind him, a giant ice worm king the size of a head, and its entire body was transparent. It was several hundred times larger than an ordinary ice worm. The ice worm king had 8 tentacles that were as thick as fingers and about a foot long. They swayed slightly in the air, and the ice worm king's wings flapped rapidly. Every time they flapped, there would be a sound like a tidal wave. Chapter 1357. Following the ice worm king's tide-like sound, all the surrounding ice worms chased after Xiaohua. These tens of thousands of ice worms fluttered in the air, creating a sound similar to a tidal wave crashing against the shore. This wasn't the most frightening thing. The most frightening thing was that behind Xiaohua, the ice worm king actually chased after him. Its speed wasn't slower than Xiaohua's, it was even faster. How could Xiaohua have time to look back? Just these tens of thousands of ice worms were enough to take his life, not to mention the ice worm king that actually had spiritual sense. Xiaohua exerted all his strength and tried his best to fly out of the canyon. But as soon as Xiaohua flew out of the canyon, an earthen yellow brilliance descended from the sky and wrapped around his body. Xiaohua's eyes swept over and saw the short and fat cultivator on the shuttle. He secretly complained in his heart. This is what it means to have a wolf in front and a tiger behind. Fortunately, he still had fireball talismans in his hand. With a wave of his hand, several fireball talismans flew into the air and exploded towards the earthen yellow ring. Pung pung pung. Several fireball talismans exploded, and sparks flew everywhere. Unfortunately, the ring did not explode into pieces like Xiaohua had imagined. It was so much so that the speed of the ring's descent was not affected at all. Xiaohua's fireball talismans only caused the ring to sway slightly. AI, is this the difference between magic tools and yellow talismans? Is this the difference between a second-layer qi refining cultivator and a seventh-layer qi refining cultivator? Xiaohua already saw the triangle in the short and fat cultivator's hand and couldn't help but sigh. At the same time, he also secretly felt lucky that he was able to kill another 7th-level qi refining cultivator. Seeing that the fireball talismans were ineffective, Xiaohua didn't have any more tricks up his sleeve. With a wave of his hand, he threw a fire net talisman into the air. A fire net blocked the bottom of the ring, and he quickly flew towards the short and fat cultivator's shuttle. That cultivator had already guessed Xiaohua's intentions. With a wave of his hand, several confinement talismans also flew towards Xiaohua. At the same time, the shuttle under his feet flew out several feet, increasing the distance between him and Xiaohua. Sigh, Xiaohua sighed. He shot out several more fireball talismans, blowing away the oncoming confinement talismans. Seeing the short and fat cultivator pulling away from him, he knew that his usual trick had already been seen through. In the air, the descending ring had already arrived above Xiaohua's head. Xiaohua's fire net talisman was only able to block it for a moment before it was completely crushed by the ring. It continued to fall without stopping, smashing towards Xiaohua. Xiaohua sighed and hurriedly flew to the side, trying in vain to dodge the ring. Unfortunately, this ring was not a yellow talisman. Under the control of the short and fat cultivator, its speed was not something that Xiaohua could dodge. Xiaohua had just flown a meter or so away when the ring came down on him. Seeing that the ring had arrived above his head, Xiaohua waved his hand and took out the devil's spear. He was about to stab the ring above his head, but at the same time the ring fell. The Iceworm King also chased out of the canyon. As soon as the Iceworm King came out of the canyon, its cold divine sense swept out again. Seeing two cultivators, the Iceworm King's 8 antennae rapidly swayed. An extremely cold spiritual energy was generated from the Iceworm King's antennae, and then it split into two and shot towards Xiaohua and the short and fat cultivator. The ring fell on top of Xiaohua's head and directly wrapped around him. Xiaohua's demonic spear simply pierced empty air. Immediately after, the ring shook above Xiaohua's head and transformed into an earthen yellow circle, covering Xiaohua inside. Xiaohua felt as if his whole body was being pressed down by a huge force, unable to move in the slightest. Next, the earthen yellow circle entered Xiaohua's body and tightly wrapped around him. It was several times harder than a confinement talisman. Not only that, when Xiaohua was hit by the short and fat cultivator's magic weapon, the Iceworm King's extremely cold spiritual energy also attacked. In an instant, Xiaohua's whole body was condensed into a layer of frost. Moreover, the frost was condensing from the outside to the inside. Not only the yellow circle that the short and fat cultivator used to attack Xiaohua, but also Xiaohua's own defensive iron cloak talisman. They were all condensed into a solid layer of ice. Xiaohua was like an icicle, falling straight down into the pitch-black bottom of the canyon. Seeing that Xiaohua had been hit by his Dharma treasure and the Iceworm King's spirit chi and had fallen into the air, the short and fat cultivator's face lit up with joy. However, before his joy could fully emerge, the Iceworm King's spirit chi attacked him. The short and fat cultivator could only freeze the joy on his face. He urged the shuttle under his feet to flee far away, wanting to escape from this canyon. While he was fleeing, he didn't forget to urge the magic weapon in his hand. Another ring flew out from the magic weapon and struck horizontally at the Iceworm King, wanting to stop it. The Iceworm King's wings flapped, and the sound of tides rose again. All the iceworms flew out of the canyon, chasing after the short and fat cultivator. At the same time, they also chased in the direction that Li Xiaowen and the others had fled. As for the Iceworm King, it didn't care about the ring flying horizontally at all. It flew straight up and crashed into the ring. With a crack, the ring hit the Iceworm King's body. Before the ring could turn into a circle, it was frozen into a block of ice by the Iceworm King's extreme cold. After being hit by the Iceworm King, it turned into ice shards and fell into the air. The Iceworm King's antennae swayed slightly, but its skull-sized body didn't stop at all. It was faster than the short and fat cultivator's shuttle and chased out of the canyon. In the night sky, the slanting full moon poured its bright light onto the Iceworm King's body. Very little of the moonlight dissipated, but most of it was absorbed by the Iceworm King's body. Xiaohua was hit by the Iceworm King's extreme cold. His entire body was frozen solid, and he fell from the sky. The layer of ice frozen by the Iceworm King was different from ordinary iceworms. Inside the layer of ice, Xiaohua felt a bone-piercing cold seeping into his body bit by bit, as if trying to freeze every inch of his body. He knew that if this cold seeped into his body, he would be completely turned into a block of ice. Not only would he be unable to move his hands and feet, even his true chi would be frozen. Whatever magic power and other things would be unable to flow. Therefore, in his panic, Xiaohua immediately used his Heart Sutra to move the true chi in his meridians bit by bit with difficulty, hoping to force the extreme cold out of his body. Just as Xiaohua was silently circulating his Heart Sutra, a loud bang resounded. It was as if an ice cube had crashed into another ice cube. Xiaohua fell to the ground. Around him were icicles that fell to the ground from the air. The huge impact shook Xiaohua until he was dizzy. The true chi in his body was almost out of breath. While Xiaohua was dizzy, he immediately focused his mind and tried to move his true chi, hoping to pull himself out of the jaws of death. It was the same as Xiaohua's usual nighttime cultivation. However, at this time, he couldn't sit cross-legged nor could he close his eyes. The reverse light in the space behind Xiaohua's head stopped rotating. Countless different starlight descended from the sky, wrapping around Xiaohua and the blocks of ice around him. Those blocks of ice were admittedly extremely cold and thick, but they couldn't prevent Xiaohua from absorbing the starlight at all. In the night sky, The full moon that had already descended had an extremely strange trace of brilliance falling on Xiaohua's body. Like the other starlight, it was absorbed by Xiaohua. Following the absorption of the starlight, inside Xiaohua's body, inside his bones and flesh, there were 132 mysterious dots that emitted pitch-black flames. As soon as these pitch-black flames appeared, they immediately began to swallow the different starlight that had seeped into Xiaohua's body. After the starlight was absorbed, the pitch-black flames didn't change at all, but the extreme cold that had invaded Xiaohua's body was already stopped. Moreover, as time passed, the ice on the surface of Xiaohua's body actually gradually melted. The true qi in Xiaohua's meridians also slowly accelerated. After an unknown amount of time, Xiaohua gradually woke up from his unconscious state. The true qi in his body had already returned to normal, and he could feel his hands and feet. However, because Xiaohua was awake, the different starlight had already disappeared and the reverse light had also begun to mysteriously rotate. Xiaohua checked for a bit, and knew that the cold air had already been forced out of his body by the circulating true qi. Moreover, because of the forced circulation of true qi, his magic power had actually increased to a certain extent. This is actually a good place to cultivate. Xiaohua was pleasantly surprised and couldn't help but think to himself. Then Xiaohua's arms exerted strength and the tip of the demonic spear in his hand pierced outwards with all his strength. Ka! There was a slight sound at the tip of the spear, but Xiaohua's body didn't break free as easily as before. This Ice Worm King is really powerful. Xiaohua's heart still had lingering fear. He once again exerted 120% of his strength, and exerted all his strength to struggle. After the time it took to eat a meal, and who knows how many times he tried, Xiaohua finally broke the ice on his arms and legs and broke free from it. Looking at the other parts of his body that were covered in ice, Xiaohua picked up the tip of the spear, and began to randomly poke. Unfortunately, the effect was limited. Immediately after, Xiaohua took out the fireball talisman and wanted to try using a fireball. However, after thinking for a moment, he gave up. Not only was he afraid of injuring himself, he was even more afraid of attracting the Ice Worm King again. In the end, Xiaohua once again used the tip of the spear to poke outwards from the inside for who knows how long before the ice on his body was completely shattered. Where is this place? Xiaohua broke free from the ice, and only now had the mind to look around. Huh? What is this? Xiaohua looked around and his gaze fell on his feet. Under his feet was a transparent layer of ice. Following the faint reflection of the ice on the stone walls, Xiaohua saw that there were many black things in the ice. When he squatted down and looked carefully, he couldn't help but jump in fright. Those black things were actually lifelike people. When he looked carefully, Xiaohua couldn't help but feel his hair stand on end. This was because every human figure in the ice had a frightened expression on their faces. Every one of their movements was not one that wasn't struggling, but every one of their eyes was filled with despair. Sigh, these people are probably the same as me. They encountered the Ice Worm King and were sealed in ice by the Ice Worm King. After a long time, they turned into a big block of ice. If I didn't break free today, wouldn't I end up like them? Sealed under this layer of ice with them? Xiaohua thought. Then he saw the storage pouches on these people's waists, and some magic tools in their hands. Xiaohua's heart stirred. He picked up the tip of the spear, and began to chisel at the ice under his feet. Chapter 1358. Xiaohua's arms had the strength of 10,000 jin. Coupled with the sharp tip of the demonic spear, this was his secret technique to break through with force. However, at this moment, it had no effect. Xiaohua didn't know what the Ice Worm King's extremely cold aura was, but the layer of ice it formed was actually so sturdy. Xiaohua tried a few times, but he couldn't even leave a mark on the surface of the layer of ice, let alone break the layer of ice and take out the storage bag inside. Xiaohua was somewhat disappointed, but there was nothing he could do. Looking at the gradually darkening night sky, he knew that the full moon had already set. It was the darkness before dawn. If he didn't take advantage of this time to escape from the South Kaikai-ping, when the sun rose, all the ice worms would come out and he would die without a burial place. Therefore, Xiaohua took out a flight talisman and stuck it on his body. His body flew lightly, and after looking at the direction, he was about to fly towards the canyon. At this moment, Xiaohua's gaze landed on the canyon where the Iceworm King had chased from. In the darkness, there was actually a faint light. Although the light was far away, Xiaohua could see it very clearly. It was faint like a pile of fireflies. What is that? Could it be some kind of treasure? Xiaohua's heart was moved. He thought of what Li Xiaowen and the others said. There were some uncommon spiritual herbs in the South Kaikai-ping, which attracted cultivators to take the risk. The Iceworm King should have already chased out of the canyon. I'm afraid it's killing that short and fat cultivator. Moreover, the iceworms in the canyon have all followed the Iceworm King. At this moment, the nest should be empty. Since this young master suffered a big loss here and almost lost his life, how could he not take some treasures to calm himself down? Xiaohua thought to himself. He took out a stack of fireball talismans from his bosom and landed on the ground. Sticking close to the ice at the bottom of the canyon, he quietly flew towards the light. Contrary to Xiaohua's expectations, the light seemed very close, but it actually flew very far. Moreover, along the way, he only saw corpses in the ice from time to time. Other than that, there were some strange spiritual fruits growing in the ice. As for the ice worms and the like, there wasn't even half of them. Xiaohua knew that the layer of ice was hard, so those rare and precious spirit fruits were unable to be transplanted into his space. He could only pluck the fruits from the ice. Before he even reached the place where the light shone, he had already plucked more than a dozen icy fruits of various sizes and colors. When Xiaohua arrived in front of the light, he couldn't help but feel disappointed. That thing was the size of an egg, and there were still some flaws on it. That light seemed to be absorbed from the full moon in the night sky. At this moment, as the full moon fell, the light had already dimmed. What is this? What is it for? Xiaohua stood at the side with some hesitation. Although he was standing there, he could clearly feel that it was much colder than before. He knew that this coldness came from this egg-like thing, but he still didn't know what this thing was for. Forget it, let's just take it first and talk about it later. Xiaohua had always been the type of person who would rather take the wrong thing than let it go. How could he return empty-handed? Just as Xiaohua bent down and reached out to grab it, the sound of something breaking through the air suddenly rang out in the silent canyon. Someone's there. Xiaohua stared blankly and became vigilant. At this moment, other than the faint light coming from the egg, everything else was pitch black. He couldn't see any hiding place. Xiaohua didn't have time to look back. His eyes turned slightly and saw a groove next to the ice layer next to the egg. Without thinking, he laid down on his back. At the same time, he also grasped the tip of the demonic spear in his hand. The night was pitch black, so he wasn't afraid that someone would see clearly. Xiaohua had just laid down when the sound of flying came closer. Listening to the sound, it was coming towards the egg. Could it be that short and fat cultivator from before? Xiaohua laid there, not daring to move in the slightest. Only his eyes were left spinning. Li Xiaowen, Fu Shu, and the others should have already escaped from the southern color plane. How could they dare to come back? Moreover, those two short and fat cultivators came early in the morning. Those red worms were also theirs. They should have been used to lure the Iceworm King. Their goal should be this egg-like thing. Xiaohua immediately understood. Those two short and fat cultivators had come early in the morning and arranged everything to lure the Iceworm King out. However, his group of 6 had disrupted their plans, so the short and fat cultivator had the intention to kill them. Just as he was thinking, that cultivator had already arrived next to the egg. Borrowing the dim light of the egg, Xiaohua could already see the cultivator's figure. It was indeed short and fat. Moreover, that cultivator's Taoist robe was damaged and his hair was covered in ice. It seemed that it was extremely difficult for him to escape from the Iceworm King's attack. This guy's methods are quite good. A 7th layer Qi refining cultivator was actually able to dodge the attack of the Iceworm King, which is comparable to a foundation establishment cultivator. Xiaohua thought with some amazement. Although the cultivator was close to the egg, he was still cautious and didn't rush to pick it up. First, he placed a yellow talisman on his body, then 2 more on his left and right hands. Next, he tilted his head and listened carefully. At this time, apart from the light of the egg, the entire canyon was pitch black. The short and fat cultivator simply couldn't see Xiaohua lying on the ground. After a while, seeing that there was nothing else around him, the short and fat cultivator leaned over and took the egg in his hand. It seemed to be extremely cold. The cultivator's hands were trembling. Borrowing the faint light of the egg, Xiaohua could clearly see the cultivator's expression of extreme surprise and joy. Hee, the Iceworm King's egg. I finally got it. Although it's a bit lacking, but it's enough. I have hope of reaching foundation establishment. The cultivator couldn't help but mutter to himself. Then he clapped his hands and put the egg into the pitch-black storage pouch at his waist. Humph, if it weren't for those rogue cultivators, I'm afraid I wouldn't have succeeded so easily. However, Junior Marshall Brothers' life wouldn't have been lost here. Those rogue cultivators are really hateful. The short and fat cultivator slapped his storage pouch and took out a flying talisman. He stuck it on his body and urged his transcendence energy to fly away. Just as his feet left the ground, Xiaohua's figure suddenly flew out from the ice trough and shot towards the short and fat cultivator like an arrow. The short and fat cultivator was originally extremely vigilant, but after easily obtaining the Iceworm King's egg, he knew that there was no danger nearby. He was overjoyed and inevitably relaxed. Moreover, he was already flying, so he was even more unguarded. Xiaohua's sneak attack was just perfect. Ah, who is it? The short and fat cultivator heard the movement and immediately slapped his storage pouch. However, Xiaohua was very close to him, and Xiaohua's flying speed was comparable to an 11th layer qi refining cultivator. In such a short distance, Xiaohua was scheming against the short and fat cultivator. How could the short and fat cultivator have time to resist? Kacha, a crisp sound rang out. Under Xiaohua's enormous strength, the devil spear tip had already pierced through the short and fat cultivator's defense. Immediately after, with a poochie sound, the spear tip pierced deeply into the cultivator's back. Just like how it killed the other person just now, the black qi on the spear tip wrapped around the cultivator's heart, and the cultivator's vitality was completely gone. A pitiful 7th layer qi refining cultivator, under Xiaohua's close-range attack, simply didn't have the strength to fight back. Unexpectedly, he didn't even turn his head and died tragically under the devil spear tip. Even at death's door, he didn't know who killed him. After killing the short and fat cultivator, Xiaohua's heart finally relaxed. With a shake of the spear tip, the short and fat cultivator's corpse was thrown onto the ice. Looking at the 3 storage pouches on the cultivator's body, Xiaohua unhesitatingly opened them. When he opened them, he saw that of the 2 pitch-black storage pouches, only one contained the Iceworm King's egg that he just put in. The other was completely empty. As for the seemingly ordinary storage pouch, apart from the triangular magic tool, there were some high and mid-grade spirit stones, as well as many yellow talismans and a small booklet. Then, Xiaohua joyfully took out the booklet and the Iceworm King's egg. When he looked at it in the nearly empty light, he saw that the booklet was followed by the insect scripture. But it wasn't a cultivation method. Bad luck. Xiaohua sighed. These cultivators, why didn't they put the cultivation method in their storage pouches? They really made this young master work for nothing. Saying this, Xiaohua casually threw the booklet and the Iceworm King's egg into his own space. Then he took everything else from the storage pouch into his own space. With a wave of his hand, he was about to throw the 3 storage bags to the ground. However, on second thought, he remembered that these storage bags represented supreme-grade spirit stones. It would be a pity to throw them away for no reason. With that thought, he put the storage bags into his sleeve. Afterwards, Xiaohua didn't dare to delay any longer. His figure flew up and flew towards the other side of the canyon. After entering the other side of the canyon, he flew for another pipe of smoke. The sky gradually brightened and 2 more canyons appeared in the canyon. Where should I go? Xiaohua scratched his ears and cheeks. He was most afraid of this kind of fork in the road. How could I forget? Xiaohua slapped his forehead and remembered the consecutive note talisman that Li Xiaowen gave everyone before entering the southern Kaiping. Wasn't that the consecutive note talisman supposed to be used at this time? Xiaohua quickly took out the consecutive note talisman and urged it with his magic power. The consecutive note talisman actually let out a soft whistle and circled in the air before flying towards the canyon on the left at extreme speed. Little ancestor, can you not scream? Hearing the sound, Xiaohua was greatly shocked. He was really afraid that this sound would attract the Iceworm King. That was a strength comparable to a Foundation establishment cultivator. It was far from something Xiaohua could resist. Xiaohua urged the flight talisman and closely chased after the sharp whistle, flying through the twists and turns of the canyon. Early in the morning, Xiaohua's luck really exploded. In the time it took to eat a meal, he didn't know how many twists and turns he took, but Xiaohua actually didn't encounter a single iceworm, let alone the Iceworm King. Hearing the sharp whistle in front of him stop, the canyon in front of him suddenly opened up. Xiaohua understood that he had most likely passed through the southern Kaiping. Sure enough, a surprised voice sounded from the foothills in the distance. Fellow Taoist Yong, is that you? Fellow Taoist Yong? Yongshang? Xiaohua was stunned. Soon after, he slowed down his flying speed and said in a clear voice, which fellow Taoist in front? I am Xiaohua. Ah? Fellow Taoist Xiao? You. How did you escape? Xiaohua heard the voice in front of him. It was Fan Daomao. Chapter 1359. That's strange. Fellow Taoist Fan, could it be that only you could escape, and I should be buried in the South Kaiping? When Xiaohua saw Fan Daomao, he felt relaxed. Although he said so, he had a smile on his face. Not at all, not at all. Fan Daomao was embarrassed. He cupped his hands and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, please don't blame us. Fellow Taoist was besieged by the iceworms at the beginning, and was also ambushed by the disciples of the Black Spirit sect. We thought that even with our cultivation, it would be difficult to escape. Fellow Taoist Xiao. I'm afraid that it bodes ill rather than well. Fellow Taoist Xiao. As they spoke, 3 people flew from the foot of the mountain. They were Li Xiaowen, Fu Shu, Sun Fian, and only Yongshang was missing. Greetings, fellow Taoists. I was lucky to escape with my life. Xiaohua cupped his hands and greeted. Ai, not bad, not bad. Li Xiaowen returned the greeting and said, in such a dangerous situation, fellow Taoist Xiao was actually able to escape. Very good. Then he looked around and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, you also saw the situation last night. In the iceworm swarm, we couldn't even take care of ourselves, so it was difficult for us to help you. Please forgive us. Xiaohua shook his head and said with a smile, I already said last night that in the South Kaiping, I will be careful. If there is any accident, I won't dare to implicate you. Whether I stay in the valley or escape outside, it's I's business. It's not your fault. Then he looked around and asked with concern, that? Fellow Taoist Yong, did you stay in the valley? Li Xiaowen smiled bitterly and told him what happened. It turned out that after Li Xiaowen and the other 4 were discovered by the iceworms, they tried their best to escape. However, their flying speed was not as good as the iceworms, and they were not as skillful as Xiaohua. Therefore, they could only rely on the yellow talismans in their storage bags to disperse the iceworms while trying their best to escape from the valley. In that situation, no one had the time to look at each other. When they escaped from the South Kaiping, they found that Xiaohua and Yongshang were missing. There was no need to talk about Xiaohua. When they were escaping from the southern Kaiping, they had already seen Xiaohua throw out an incomparably powerful fireball talisman and be besieged by a swarm of iceworms. In their impression, with Xiaohua's cultivation, there was no way he could survive. But what about Yongshang? Based on everyone's memories, it seemed that Yongshang had followed behind them and escaped together. As for where and when he disappeared, no one knew. Although the 4 of them managed to escape with their lives, which could be considered a great fortune, but another problem appeared. Apart from Fan Daomao's silk bag, which had already been used, Xiaohua and Yongshang's silk bags had not been used. Without these 2 people's silk bags, no one would know where the final location would be, and the so-called cultivation technique and treasure would naturally be hopeless. Actually, when they saw Xiaohua being besieged by the iceworms, they had already somewhat given up in their hearts. However, the 4 of them still waited here, hoping that after Fan Daomao came out, the 5 of them would discuss what to do. But what shocked them was that the one who came out wasn't Fan Daomao, but Xiaohua, who they thought had long been frozen into an icicle. Spirit husbandry sect? When Xiaohua heard Li Xiaowen's description, he couldn't help but be stunned. He asked curiously, "Those two short and fat cultivators were from Spirit husbandry sect?" "Two Spirit husbandry sect disciples?" Fu Shu asked curiously. "Not just one." "Io, that's right." When Xiaohua heard this, he knew that he had let it slip. When he was ambushed by the second Spirit husbandry sect disciple, Li Xiaowen and the rest had already escaped. What they saw was only the first Spirit husbandry sect disciple. Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "When I escaped from the southern color plane, I saw the cultivator who controlled the red flying insects and the other short and fat cultivator being frozen in the icicle. That's how I knew that they were two Spirit husbandry sect disciples." "I see." Fu Shu nodded slightly. "That's right." Fellow Taoist Xiao Sun Fian, who had been silent all this while, said in a low voice, "That, fellow Taoist, when you passed by the two Spirit husbandry sect disciples, did you see a black spirit storage bag?" "Spirit storage bag?" Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "Why is fellow Taoist Sun asking this?" After hearing Xiaohua's words, not only did Sun Fian's eyes light up, even Li Xiaowen, Fu Shu, and Fan Daomao's eyes widened. "Looks like fellow Taoist Xiao has seen this spirit storage bag before?" Li Xiaowen said with a smile. "Hee, fellow Taoist Li, are you also interested in this spirit storage bag?" Xiaohua asked ambiguously. Sun Fian changed from his previous wooden expression and said first, "Of course, a spirit storage bag is the foundation of carrying spiritual items, just like a spirit storage bag. It's just that a spirit storage bag is even more precious than a spirit storage bag. In the country of Xi, only the Spirit husbandry sect and a few other sects that rear spiritual items have spirit storage bags. The other sects don't have them. I have always wanted to carry spiritual items, but I never had the chance to get one. So if it's convenient for fellow Taoist Xiao to transfer it to I?" This Xiaohua knew the use of the spirit storage bag and already understood where the red flying insects and pigeons came from, but he still faintly felt that there was something inappropriate about it. Seeing Xiaohua hesitate, Sun Fian was even more certain of Xiaohua's thoughts and said anxiously, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, I am willing to offer 20 no, 30 supreme-grade spirit stones in exchange for this spirit storage bag." "Fellow Taoist Sun, you want to exchange a mere 30 supreme-grade spirit stones for a spirit storage bag?" Li Xiaowen said coldly. "A spirit storage bag is much more precious than a spirit storage bag. I'm afraid it's not something that can be exchanged with these spirit stones, right?" Sun Fian was a bit embarrassed and rubbed his hands. "I know that this spirit storage bag is priceless, but we rogue cultivators have accumulated it for many years and used many methods, but it's only this many spirit stones. No matter how much more I have, I can't take it out." Xiaohua's eyes swiveled. He was just about to refuse, but his gaze swept over and saw the eagerness in some people's eyes. His heart involuntarily shuddered, and he thought to himself, "This spirit storage bag is admittedly good, but it's also a scourge. Leaving it with me will definitely arouse the covetous eyes of others. Why don't I exchange it for something else? I don't have any spirit items left." Thinking up to here, Xiaohua cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, I's cultivation is shallow. To be honest, I haven't even heard of this spirit storage bag. If everyone is interested, I am naturally willing to take it out to exchange." "Oh, that's great." Fu Shu clapped and said, "Does fellow Taoist Xiao have 2 spirit storage bags? Why don't we bid?" Xiaohua didn't hide it either and nodded, saying, "I indeed picked up 2 spirit storage bags, but they were both empty. I even thought that they were spirit storage bags. In addition, I need cultivation techniques, spirit stones, and the like, but I don't need them for the time being." Cultivation techniques? When everyone heard that there were 2 spirit storage bags, they were delighted at first, but when they heard that Xiaohua wanted cultivation techniques, they frowned again. For a moment, there was actually an awkward silence. Li Xiaowen looked at everyone and took the initiative to say, "Sai fellow Taoist Xiao, I am also an itinerant cultivator. Of course I know what fellow Taoist lacks. But My heaven-forsaken cultivation technique can only be given to fellow Taoist Xiao by fellow Taoist Qing. We don't have the right to give it to you privately. Moreover, looking at the current situation, I'm afraid that we don't have the cultivation techniques that we obtained ourselves, so we also don't have the means to give it to you. Sai, that's right. Everyone also echoed. How about this? I know that fellow Taoist wants to learn the art of talisman crafting. I am not talented, but I'm willing to teach you with all my heart. What does fellow Taoist Xiao think? Li Xiaowen, who had never wanted to teach, put forward a very good condition. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua simply didn't care for such a condition. Thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua said, fellow Taoist Li's condition really moves I. However, fellow Taoist also wants to cultivate. How could I dare to always disturb you? How about this? If fellow Taoist Li has any talisman crafting ancient books that seem to have the same value as this spirit storage pouch, I will also exchange it. This Li Xiaowen was somewhat hesitant. To tell the truth, if he were to take out one or two talisman crafting techniques, it simply wouldn't have the same value as the spirit storage pouch. There were also several people watching from the side, so he couldn't be stingy. Just as Li Xiaowen was hesitating, Sun Fian smiled and said, fellow Taoist Xiao, I don't have any talisman crafting techniques here. However, I do have a book on alchemy techniques. Alchemy techniques? Hearing this, Li Xiaowen was also astonished. Fellow Taoist Xiao, the spirit storage pouch is admittedly precious, but it doesn't seem to be as precious as alchemy techniques, right? Sai, I was precisely going to explain to fellow Taoist Xiao. I's alchemy techniques are also incomplete. I also plan to use a book on the basics of artifact crafting from the spirit storage pouch, as well as some spirit stones to exchange with fellow Taoist Xiao. Sun Fian said. Artifact crafting? Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat, and he inwardly said, this cultivation technique is admittedly not easy to find, but finding one on alchemy and artifact crafting is also not bad. Soon after, he nodded and said, if fellow Taoist Sun has such a book, even if it's not a cultivation technique, I would be happy to exchange it. Fellow Taoist Xiao Fushu and Fan Daomao were greatly anxious. They hurriedly called out to Xiao Hua, and also stated their conditions. Their things were also not bad, but unfortunately, it was not a cultivation technique, and it was also not to Xiao Hua's liking. They could only cup their hands and say, fellow Taoists, I only picked up 2 spirit storage pouches. 4 fellow Taoists will definitely be disappointed, so I can only pick up what I need to exchange it. Please forgive me, fellow Daomao. Fu Shu and Fan Daomao were very disappointed, but they also knew that what Xiao Hua said was the truth. On the other hand, Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian were very happy. Li Xiaowen gave Xiao Hua a book on talisman crafting techniques that he obtained. In addition, like Sun Fian, he also gave some top-grade spirit stones as additional compensation. However, how could Xiao Hua accept too many top-grade spirit stones in front of everyone? He only picked up 2 spirit stones of different attributes of the 5 elements. It's only 10 top-grade spirit stones. It shouldn't arouse the evil intentions of others, right? Xiao Hua thought without changing his expression. On the other hand, Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian were overjoyed. They put away the spirit stones that they took out and patted Xiao Hua's shoulder knowingly. After putting everything into his own storage pouch, Xiao Hua took out the 2 spirit storage pouches and handed them to Li Xiaowen and Sun Fian. The 2 of them took them and carefully checked them before putting them into their sleeves. So it was just a guess about the spirit husbandry sect. Since we saw the spirit storage pouches, there's no doubt that the spirit husbandry sect was at that time. Those who commit evil deeds are doomed to destruction. The disciples of such a famous sect actually plotted against fellow Taoist Xiao. Naturally, they ended up being frozen into ice pillars by the ice worms. Sun Fian said with a smile. However, Sun Fian was slightly stunned. He looked at Xiao Hua with a strange expression and asked, fellow Taoist Xiao, since the 2 disciples of the spirit husbandry sect were frozen, how did you escape? Chapter 1360. Looking at the strange expression on Sun Fian's face, Xiao Hua was very annoyed. He wished he could take out all the fireball talismans and smash them down. You say, this person usually keeps his mouth shut and doesn't say anything. Why is he so curious at this time? I gave you the spirit storage pouch, and even gave you so many top-grade spirit stones. Why can't I shut your mouth? Xiaohua thought to himself. Actually, this kind of question generally involved a cultivator's divine ability, so it was naturally secretive and not suitable to be asked. However, Xiaohua's cultivation was low, and even though his magic power was deep, it was still not enough. In this group of cultivators, he always had the attitude of a junior. Sun Fian's way of asking, the meaning of concern was even more than probing. It was not particularly abrupt. I spoke too much. Sun Fian saw that Xiaohua was somewhat hesitant and immediately cupped his hands in apology. However, his words had already been said and extremely successfully aroused the curiosity of Li Xiaowen and the others. What was the use of apologizing now? Xiaohua cursed in his heart. His eyes turned, looked at everyone and said with a smile, "Everyone guess, how did I escape danger?" Guess. Sun Fian's eyes widened. He seemed to have heard such a funny answer for the first time. Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't keep us in suspense. This is fellow Taoist's secret. Hee, it's fine if you don't say it. Fu Shu said with a smile. At this time, we should be thinking about whether to continue waiting for fellow Taoist Yong here or look inside. Xiaohua was very happy in his heart. This Fu Shu is really funny. However, Li Xiaowen's brows did not relax because of Fu Shu's words. Instead, he looked at Xiaohua thoughtfully. Xiaohua very keenly sensed something was wrong and asked awkwardly, "Fellow Taoist Li, could it be that you guessed? Is this the reason?" Li Xiaowen thought for a moment, took out a yellow talisman, and handed it over. Xiaohua was slightly stunned. He reached out and took it. When he saw it clearly, his expression changed slightly. That yellow talisman was none other than the fireball talisman that Xiaohua refined. Hee, fellow Taoist Xiao, did you rely on this strange fireball talisman to escape from the group of ice worms in the South Kaiping? Seeing Xiaohua's expression change, Li Xiaowen had a knowing expression and laughed. Xiaohua's thoughts turned rapidly, and his face changed into an extremely embarrassed expression. He said embarrassedly, "It's not I. I wanted to take it out the day before yesterday, but Sai, you can't blame fellow Taoist Xiao for this." Li Xiaowen took the fireball talisman from Xiaohua's hand and said with a wry smile, "Even I occasionally came across this strange fireball talisman in E.G. I spent a lot of effort to buy a few. I didn't expect fellow Taoist Xiao to be so rich and overbearing, to buy so many." Xiaohua stared blankly and hurriedly said, "Fellow Taoist Li misunderstood. When I bought it, it was very cheap." After thinking for a moment, Li Xiaowen nodded. "I think fellow Taoist bought it early. That's because the strangeness of this fireball talisman hasn't been discovered yet." Fellow Taoist Li, fellow Taoist Xiao, what are you talking about? Fan Daomao asked curiously. How come I don't understand? Hee, no wonder fellow Taoist Fan doesn't understand, Li Xiaowen explained with a smile. After listening for a moment, Xiaohua finally understood. It turned out that after Li Xiaowen got the news that he was going on a treasure hunt, he went to E.G. to purchase the things he needed. He himself was a talisman master, and he also had some acquaintances in E.G. From those sellers, he learned that a very strange fireball talisman had recently appeared in E.G. The talisman paper and talisman ink used to refine these fireball talismans were all low-grade, but the talisman characters on the talisman paper seemed to be naturally formed. It was very obvious that the method of writing high-grade talismans was used on these low-grade fireball talismans. The strangest thing was that the power of these fireball talismans was really terrifying. They were directly comparable to the legendary fireball talismans of the highest grade. Li Xiaowen himself could also refine fireball talismans, but he could only refine low-grade fireball talismans using low-grade talisman paper and talisman ink. Even if he switched to mid-grade talisman paper and talisman ink, only a small portion of the fireball talismans refined would be of mid-grade. If he used high-grade talisman paper and talisman ink, there might be a chance to increase the quality of the fireball talismans to the mid-grade. However, Li Xiaowen wouldn't squander money and use high-grade talisman paper to refine low-grade fireball talismans. Therefore, Li Xiaowen was very curious about this fireball talisman. He found many sellers and spent a lot of spirit stones to buy several talismans. One was for research, and the other was for collection. Even just now in the southern color plane, he only used 2 talismans in an extremely dangerous situation. This fireball talisman is really amazing. Li Xiaowen sighed with emotion. Just now when I used ordinary fireball talismans, or even yellow talismans like fire snake talismans, those ice worms could only be driven away. After a moment, they would chase after me again. However, the flames emitted by this fireball talisman could actually melt the ice worms. If I had a large amount of these fireball talismans, I would be able to calmly escape. I wouldn't be in such a difficult situation. Ah, there's actually such a bizarre fireball talisman? Sun Fian said in astonishment. Which expert refined this fireball talisman? When Xiaohua heard this, his heart violently beat. Li Xiaowen sighed with emotion. According to reliable sources, this fireball talisman is the work of 3 old monsters of the Ardent Fire Mountain. 3 old monsters of the Ardent Fire Mountain? Fan Daomao's eyes widened. Those are nascent soul stage cultivators. They were bored enough to refine this fireball talisman. For what? Nascent soul stage cultivators are all old monsters who have lived for who knows how many years. Moreover, their temperaments are all strange. Who knows what they're thinking? Maybe because they're idle and bored. Sun Fian said disdainfully. But I also have some doubts. Li Xiaowen scratched his head and said, if they were bored and gave pointers to juniors, refining a few would be fine. But it's said that EG has quite a few of these fireball talismans. These 3 old seniors can't always be refining these low-level yellow talismans, right? When Xiaohua heard this, he laughed and said, it's nothing. Maybe they've accumulated it for many years, and their disciples took it all out to exchange for spirit stones? Fellow Taoist Zhao's conjecture is quite reliable. Li Xiaowen nodded and asked again, when did fellow Taoist Zhao discover this fireball talisman? Long ago. I discovered it on EG a few days after I followed Senior Qing to Jinghua City. At that time, the price was very cheap. Xiaohua didn't conceal the time. No wonder fellow Taoist Xiao was very generous when he threw out these fireball talismans, as if he didn't feel any heartache. Li Xiaowen laughed. Xiaohua took out several fireball talismans from his storage pouch and handed them to the 4 people, saying, when I bought them, they weren't expensive to begin with. Naturally, I didn't feel any heartache. However, there aren't many left in the southern color plane that relied on them to blast open a path. Please kindly accept these, fellow Taoists. I was also very curious about such a miraculous fireball talisman. Sun Fian and the others very happily took them and carefully looked at them before putting them away in their storage pouches. They weren't talisman masters, so their understanding was limited. However, supreme-grade fireball talismans could save lives in certain situations. This was something they knew very well. Alright, fellow Taoist Xiao, being able to escape was beyond our expectations. Our treasure hunt has increased by another percentage. Li Xiaowen clapped his hands and said, but next, should we continue to wait here for fellow Taoist Yong? Or should we go and provide support? Fu Shu had just asked this question. But now that Li Xiaowen brought it up again, everyone looked at each other, not saying a word more. The situation was very obvious. Even the 2nd-level qi condensation Xiaohua had flown out, but the 4th-level qi condensation Yongshang still hadn't come out. Was there any need to say what happened to Yongshang? Perhaps he'd already been frozen into an icicle. Waiting was definitely not a good strategy, so they could only go in and search. However, everyone had just escaped from inside, and had almost lost their lives. Who would dare to go in again? However, if they didn't go in, they wouldn't be able to get Yongshang's silk bag, and they wouldn't be able to find the place arranged by Qing Fengmin. Giving up like this was admittedly something they weren't willing to do, but taking the risk of death was something they didn't dare to do even more. What should they do? The 5 people looked at each other, and stared at each other. None of them spoke. After a long while, Fan Daomao sighed. Alas, what a pity. What's there to pity? If fellow Taoist goes, we're willing to. Fu Shu said halfway and smiled wryly. We can't go. And I don't have anything to promise. If it really doesn't work out, then you and I will disperse. Our Heavens Forsaken isn't the first time it's been organized. There will be opportunities in the future. It's still useful to keep our lives. Fan Daomao glanced at Fu Shu and shook his head. Fellow Taoist, Fu misunderstands. What I pity is Yongshang. I heard this guy say that he just obtained a cultivation method. It said that it's an extremely powerful divine ability. It doesn't matter if he dies, but that cultivation method is only frozen in an icicle. It's really a waste of God's gift. Cultivation method? Xiao Hua's heart jumped when he heard this, but he looked at Fan Daomao and didn't quite believe it. Fellow Taoist Fan, are you telling the truth? You're not deceiving everyone, right? Li Xiaowen said softly. Fan Daomao rolled his eyes at Li Xiaowen and said impatiently, Fellow Taoist, Li presumably knows about I's friendship with Yongshang. It's not strange for I to know about this kind of thing, right? And that's true. The two fellow Taoists are also inseparable from each other in Heavens Forsaken. I can clearly see that this cultivation method is really a pity. Li Xiaowen sighed. Fellow Taoist Xiao, didn't you not have a suitable cultivation method? This thing seems to be extremely suitable for you. Sun Fian suddenly said. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. I want it, but I also need to cultivate it in my current life. That might not be the case. Fu Shu glanced at the valley behind him and said, I think that fellow Taoist Xiao has a chance to find that cultivation method. Strange, why is that? Li Xiaowen didn't wait for Xiao Hua to speak and asked. Fellow Taoist Li, you see, fellow Taoist Xiao was clearly lucky to escape from the southern color plains. Moreover, he has a fireball talisman in his storage bag that is very good against ice worms. Fellow Taoist Li only obtained this fireball talisman a few days ago, but fellow Taoist Xiao was actually able to purchase it a month ago. Presumably, he has some fate with the southern color plains. Say, if someone can enter the southern color plains, wouldn't fellow Taoist Xiao be the only one suitable? Chapter 1361. Hearing this, Xiao Hua sneered in his heart. He could still see through this little trick. Yes, fellow Taoist Fu's words are reasonable. Li Xiaowen nodded, but when he saw that Xiao Hua didn't bat an eyelid, he smiled and said, however, the South Kaiping is extremely dangerous. It's one thing to be able to escape, but fellow Taoist Xiao wouldn't risk his life for a cultivation technique that he doesn't even know exists. Don't you think so? Fellow Taoist Xiao. Fellow Taoist Li is right. Xiao Hua smiled and didn't say anything else. How about this, fellow Taoist Xiao? If you can find fellow Taoist Yang's silk bag, fellow Taoist Yang's storage bag will belong to fellow Taoist Xiao. Everything inside, including the things abandoned by us, we can let fellow Taoist Xiao take them all. What do you think? Fan Daomao's eyes turned rapidly as he continued. Sun Fian shook his head. Fellow Taoist Fan is wrong. If fellow Taoist Xiao really finds the silk bag, that storage bag originally belonged to fellow Taoist Xiao. What right do we have to stop him? Then he looked at Xiao Hua and said, however, fellow Taoist Xiao, if you can get the silk bag after I find the treasure in the future, I'll give you 20% of it. What do you think? Yes, Fan Daomao and Fu Shu also echoed. We also have the same idea. Then they looked at Li Xiaowen and said, fellow Taoist Li, how about we give fellow Taoist Xiao 20% of our things as well? This isn't impossible. Li Xiaowen looked at Xiao Hua and said, if you can really take out the silk bag, then you'll give us a second chance to find the treasure. It's only right that we give 20% of the things. Xiao Hua originally didn't want to pay attention to it, but seeing the four of them say so, he couldn't help but feel moved. These five escaped before me. They definitely didn't encounter the Iceworm King. It was just ordinary iceworms chasing them. Moreover, from what everyone said, Yongshang seemed to have followed them for a long time. If he died, he wouldn't have been close to the canyon where the Iceworm King was. Li Xiaowen and company were probably chased by the iceworms and thought that the canyon was filled with iceworms. However, I was the last to fly out, so I didn't see any iceworms along the way. Even if there is a group of iceworms, as long as it is not the Iceworm King, I can still escape freely. Who would be afraid of them? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua looked at everyone and said with a smile, I had a hard time encountering Tianqi's operation, so of course I don't want to give up, but I's cultivation is still shallow, and escaping is already a fluke. I really don't want to sell my life for these treasures. If any fellow Taoist wishes to go, I am also willing to take out my 20%. Oh, and I will also gift the few fireball talismans I have to that fellow Taoist. Some treasures. Fu Shu smiled bitterly and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, 20% for each of us is already a lot. The share of the four of us is about the same as fellow Taoist Zhao's share. Fu Shu directly omitted Xiao Hua's last two sentences, looking very earnest and well-intentioned. How about this? Li Xiaowen said. If fellow Taoist Xiao is willing to go, each of us will take out 25% of the treasures to round it up to fellow Taoist Xiao. How about it? Very good, we agree. Of course, no one had any objections and looked at Xiao Hua eagerly. Xiao Hua scratched his chin with his finger and looked at the distant canyon entrance. After a long while he sighed and said, Alas, poor people have short ambitions. Who told I to not have a suitable cultivation method? Since that's the case, I will go. Great. Everyone clapped their hands and praised. Fellow Taoist Xiao, shouldn't you leave your silk bag behind first? Fan Daomao probed. If I can't come back, what's the use of taking 4 silk bags? Xiao Hua sneered. Fellow Taoist Xiao is right. Fan Daomao smiled and said no more. Since he had made up his mind to take the risk, Xiao Hua asked Li Xiaowen for a connecting note talisman, as well as a few other yellow talismans before flying towards the canyon. After Xiao Hua flew away, Li Xiaowen and the others looked at each other. They all had the same thought in their eyes. Then they all returned to the foothills and sat cross-legged, waiting quietly. Do you all think I am a fool? Xiao Hua slowly flew into the canyon. As he pondered, he sneered and said, Everyone's cultivation is much higher than this poor Taoist's, but not a single one of them dares to come forward. Instead, you're tempting this young master with your words. I wonder who will be the one to benefit in the end. Xiao Hua didn't fly very fast. After flying for a while, he saw that it was the same as when he came out. There was nothing special in the entire canyon. Unconsciously, his courage grew. He looked back and saw that there shouldn't be anyone following him, so he increased his speed and looked for the path he came out of. Because he was looking for Yongshang, and it was more likely that he was looking for Yongshang's corpse, Xiao Hua flew very low and carefully looked at the bottom of the canyon. At this time, the sky was already bright. In the far eastern horizon, a red sun was gushing out from the sea of clouds. The entire world was full of vitality. Unlike the vitality in the early morning, the canyon Xiao Hua was in was abnormally cold. The deeper he went, the more ice and frost he saw. Of course, there were also many strange spiritual herbs along the way. Xiao Hua didn't care about them. As long as he could pick them, he would pick them and transplant them into the space. Just when Xiao Hua was about to move a foot-tall spirit grass into the space, he suddenly remembered that he had placed the Iceworm King's egg into the space last night. Could it be that the spirit grass inside would be frozen to death? When Xiao Hua immersed his thoughts into the space, he found that everything was the same as usual. That egg-shaped Iceworm King egg was placed inside, and the spiritual herbs were not affected at all. And fortunately, I was a bit anxious last night. Fortunately, nothing happened. Xiao Hua sighed in relief and threw the Iceworm King egg into the furthest corner of the space, letting it be far away from the spiritual herbs. Just when Xiao Hua was checking the space, from the southern plain, far away from Xiao Hua, came a jie sound. Although it was far away, the sound seemed to be able to resonate in people's hearts. Xiao Hua's heart shook when he heard it. He quickly pulled his mind out of the space and dodged. Not caring whether it was useful or not, he hid between a mountain rock at the bottom of the canyon. Jie. Another 2 hurried sounds shook Xiao Hua's little heart and made it beat wildly. Then it was silent again. What is this thing? Xiao Hua's face was gloomy. He thought to himself, listening to that sound, it should be a kind of bird. This thing actually dares to call out in the Iceworm King's territory. I'm afraid it came here to cause trouble? A single Iceworm King can freeze I to death without even getting close. Adding on an inexplicable bird, won't I be dead? When the city gate is on fire, the fish in the moat will also suffer. I better not get involved with others. Thinking about this, Xiaohua lost his enthusiasm to explore. He came here because he knew that there were no ice worms in this canyon. Since there was an unknown danger, he naturally had to retreat. Just as Xiaohua turned around, his gaze suddenly landed on a large tree halfway up the mountain with only bare branches, and there was actually a person looking down on it. Ah! Xiaohua was slightly startled. His body stopped for a moment, not daring to move. Seeing that person also not moving, he raised his voice and said, "Fellow Taoist, please, that person still didn't move. Could it be a dead person?" Xiaohua stared blankly and thought to himself. In the southern color plains, everyone was frozen to death. This person Xiaohua didn't dare to approach. He soared up and looked from afar. When he saw clearly, he couldn't help but be shocked. "Io, isn't this Yongshang? Why wasn't he frozen into an ice pillar by the ice worm? Moreover, there's a ball of blood on his back?" Xiaohua suddenly understood. Just now he was looking at those ice pillars and didn't pay attention to the two sides of the stone wall. Of course he couldn't see Yongshang's corpse. When Xiaohua took Yongshang's corpse down from the mountain and saw the fatal wound on the corpse, he couldn't help but gasp. He saw that Yongshang's body didn't have the slightest trace of being frozen by the ice worm. Only his Taoist robe was a bit messy, and in Yongshang's heart, there was a sharp hole. Inside the hole, the blood had already flowed out. That human heart was also gone. This clearly wasn't done by the ice worm. Could it be? There are other powerful spirit beasts in the southern color plains? Xiaohua suddenly thought of the mind-shaking cry he heard just now. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He didn't dare to delay any longer and picked up Yongshang's corpse. First, he threw everything in the storage bag into his own space. Then he took out the silk bag and put it into his storage bag. He hurriedly urged his magic power and quickly flew out of the valley. His anxious appearance like a stray dog was really laughable. Fortunately, Xiaohua didn't go too far. He didn't use any notes talismans. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he already arrived at the valley's entrance. Xiaohua slowed down and shouted loudly, "Fellow Taoistly, fellow Taoistly!" Hearing Xiaohua's shout, Li Xiaowen and the others were all stunned. They looked at each other, and all soared up. They didn't expect Xiaohua to come out so quickly. Some people didn't even think that Xiaohua would be able to come back safely. When they saw Yongshang's corpse, they were greatly shocked. They naturally looked at Yongshang's waist. Of course, the storage bag on his waist was already put into Xiaohua's sleeve, causing them to be slightly disappointed. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, did you get the silk bag?" Li Xiaowen's gaze swept over the corpse and immediately asked. "Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. It is already in I's storage bag," Xiaohua said with a smile. As he spoke, Xiaohua put down Yongshang's corpse. He patted his storage bag and took out two silk bags. He shook them in front of everyone and put them back into his storage bag. "Good." Li Xiaowen and the others finally let out a sigh of relief. Looking at Yongshang's corpse, Sun Fian frowned and said, "Where did you find fellow Taoist Yang's corpse? Is it far from the valley's entrance?" Xiaohua had already thought of a countermeasure. He said in a low voice, "It's a bit far. It was on a withered tree on a cliff. If it wasn't for I's sharp eyes, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to find it." "But, fellow Taoist Yang's injury, what's going on? I am a bit puzzled." Xiaohua pointed at Yongshang's chest and asked. Chapter 1362. This Li Xiaowen and the others looked at each other with puzzled faces. Li Xiaowen bitterly smiled and said, "Not only is fellow Taoist Xiao puzzled, I am also scratching my head. This kind of injury should have been caused by the heart being dug out. But I and the others have shallow knowledge and don't know what kind of monster or enemy did this. Fellow Taoist Li, look at the wound on fellow Taoist Yang's chest. It seems to have been cut open by something sharp." Sun Fian lowered his head and looked at the edge of the wound for a long time. "Yes, fellow Taoist Sun is right. Could it be that fellow Taoist Yong encountered a mortal enemy in the southern color plain?" Li Xiaowen held his chin and said in a low voice, "Otherwise, in addition to the ice worms in the southern color plain, There are also when Li Xiaowen said this, he suddenly thought of something and his face changed greatly. He was abnormally frightened. When he turned to look at the others, besides Xiaohua who was still somewhat confused, the other four were also pale. Let's go. Li Xiaowen shouted in a low voice. Before he finished speaking, he took out a flight talisman and stuck it on his body. He soared into the sky. The other four's movements weren't slow either, and they flew up one after another. Xiaohua was puzzled at first, but after thinking for a bit, he was greatly alarmed and flew up. The five didn't even care about Yongshang's corpse and fled far away. The five flew for more than half a day. Seeing that they were already very far away from the Gushu mountain range, they slowed down and let out a slight sigh of relief. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Li Xiaowen opened up some distance from the others and flew at the back with Xiaohua. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you've kept eye in the dark. Seeing that the people in front couldn't hear his voice, Li Xiaowen turned his face and said to Xiaohua with a deep voice. Xiaohua's heart tightened, and he promptly cupped his hands. Fellow Taoist Li, I am very puzzled. May I know what fellow Taoist is talking about? Ai fellow Taoist, don't play dumb with I. Li Xiaowen's face was full of disdain. When fellow Taoist escaped from the southern color plane, I was somewhat puzzled. With fellow Taoist's second stage flying speed, how could you escape the encirclement of the ice worms? Even with the strange fireball talisman, it's impossible to kill all the ice worms. Most importantly, I'm a talisman master myself. Of course I know that although there are high-grade talismans in this world, high-grade or top-grade talismans can't possibly increase the speed of a cultivator in the second layer to that of a cultivator in the fifth layer. Fellow Taoist Xiao, the other fellow Taoists might believe you, but I don't. So it's like that. Xiaohua's mind whirled rapidly, yet his expression didn't change. He cupped his hands and said, Fellow Taoist Li's discerning eyes are indeed like torches. I have indeed practiced a type of body lightning technique that can increase my speed when using a flight talisman. Oh, there's such a miraculous technique? Although Li Xiaowen sounded surprised, his face didn't seem to be moved. Presumably, he had already figured it out. It's a pity that I haven't mastered it yet. I can only barely use it. Xiaohua had an embarrassed look on his face. It's already enough. Your flying speed can actually catch up to us. It's absolutely something that makes people flabbergasted. Li Xiaowen shook his head. That's right, fellow Taoist Li, about fellow Taoist Yang's matter. What do you think? Xiaohua asked very modestly. I's cultivation is shallow, and my knowledge is also lacking. I still want to ask fellow Taoist Li for guidance. Li Xiaowen heard this and frowned. His face had a slight trace of fear, and he said in a low voice, Actually, I also don't know what's going on. However, according to I's guess, I'm afraid this is the work of another extremely powerful demon beast. Only a demon beast would eat a human heart. Sigh, thinking about it, fellow Taoist Yong escaped with us, and from what fellow Taoist Xiao said, the place where fellow Taoist Yong was killed wasn't too far from the entrance of the valley. I reckon that when that demon beast attacked fellow Taoist Yong, we must have been nearby. At such a close distance, we actually didn't sense anything. Fellow Taoist Xiao, say, if that demon beast targeted us, would we still have our lives? Hearing this, Xiaohua also felt his blood run cold. He very naturally turned his head to look and casually asked, Such a powerful demon beast, what kind of demon beast could it be? Who knows? Li Xiaowen activated the flying talisman and also casually said, If it wasn't a demon beast, it could also be a ghost cultivator or a devil cultivator. Devil cultivator? This was already the second time Xiaohua heard this term. He asked very curiously, These cultivators can also be more powerful than fellow Taoist Li? Devil cultivators and ghost cultivators can't be considered as cultivators. Li Xiaowen said with a smile. Devil cultivators practice the cultivation method of the devil world, and feed on the flesh and blood of human cultivators, so they are our mortal enemies. On the other hand, ghost cultivators practice an extremely strange cultivation method that feeds on the essence and blood of cultivators. This poor Taoist can't explain it clearly. However, looking at fellow Taoist Yang's fatal wound, it's also one of the methods that devil cultivators and ghost cultivators use to kill cultivators. Oh, so it's like that. Xiaohua nodded. After flying forward for a while, everyone landed in a place with beautiful scenery to rest. The light wind and gentle clouds were truly different from what they saw in the southern color plains before. The 6 people sat upright on the ground and closed their eyes to adjust their breathing. They first filled Xiaohua's magic power before they started talking. The first place, the southern color plains, we encountered extremely powerful ice worms and lost fellow Taoist Yong. The second place, the Yulian Mountains, is even more dangerous. Perhaps we will have even more losses. If any of the fellow Taoists have an accident, the silk bags won't be able to be gathered together. How will we continue on our path in the future? Fu Shu grumbled. Could it be that fellow Taoist Fu's meaning is to gather our silk bags together with one person? Sun Fian sneered. I was just saying. If you wanted to hand over the silk bag, I also won't be willing. Fu Shu repeatedly waved his hand. I just feel that this treasure hunt seems to be somewhat difficult. It's not quite the same as before. There's nothing different, Li Xiaowen said indifferently. The previous few times were also like this. Even in the end, the wandering cultivators in Heaven's Forsaken were also greatly damaged. And those who were able to stay were all extremely outstanding people. Yeah, there's only so many techniques and treasures. If everyone goes, there won't be enough to share. Fan Daomao laughed. Everyone chatted for a while, venting their nervous emotions. Only then did Li Xiaowen stand up and say, Fellow Taoists, this place is still far from the Yulian Mountains. The journey might take 5 days. There shouldn't be any danger along the way, but we still have to be careful. Immediately, the 5 of them were in high spirits again. They flew into the sky and flew towards another Yulian Mountains. Xiaohua didn't know where the Yulian Mountains was, nor did he know what dangers there were in the Yulian Mountains. However, looking at everyone's nervous expressions and what they were talking about, he knew that it was a dangerous place that wasn't any worse than the southern color plains. After flying for another half a day, night arrived. Everyone found a large cave and waited for Li Xiaowen to set up the warning talismans. Then, everyone sat down cross-legged and closed their eyes to adjust their breathing. Xiaohua was the same as before. He found a secluded place and sat with his palms facing the sky. From the outside, Xiaohua seemed to be cultivating. However, in reality, Xiaohua had already immersed his mind into the space. He had already thrown everything in Yongshang's storage bag into the space. He didn't even have time to look at it carefully. Inside Yongshang's storage bag, in addition to some bottles and jars, there were also some yellow talismans, a lot of spirit stones and a small booklet. Is this a technique? Xiaohua saw the booklet and felt a burst of ecstasy in his heart. He opened the booklet in the space. Before he could clearly see the contents, a page fell out of the booklet. When Xiaohua saw the thing that fell out, he couldn't help but be surprised. It was also a piece of gold leaf. It looked exactly the same as Zhang Jihao's. Xiaohua put the 2 pieces of gold leaf together in the space, and couldn't see any difference between them. Strange, Xiaohua thought. What kind of good thing is this gold leaf? How come Zhang Jihao has it, and Yongshang also has it? But if it's a good thing, how can it be good when many people have it? AI, maybe Li Xiaowen, Fu Shu, and the others also have it. Xiaohua thought and threw the gold leaf to the side. Then he looked at the booklet. The booklet was very thin. Inside, there were some densely packed chants. Xiaohua carefully read it. There were about a few thousand words. Unfortunately, the cover of the booklet didn't mention how to use the chants. Therefore, Xiaohua didn't know what the chants were. However, after Xiaohua recited it several times in his heart, he knew that this cultivation method wasn't a basic cultivation method. It didn't have any effect on the growth of magic power. Every time Xiaohua recited it, he would feel calm and refreshed, and it would be easier for him to enter the state of cultivation. Obviously, this is a supplementary cultivation method. Xiaohua was a little disappointed. However, he still recited the chants in his heart to keep his mind clear and organize the other things. Yongshang had a lot of things. He had more things than Zhang Jihao and the disciples of the spirit husbandry sect. Xiaohua put away the spirit stones and other things. He also put away the yellow talismans and other things. Then he looked at the bottles and jars that he took out. There were many different kinds of pills in the jars and jars. It was very complicated. This is the marrow cleansing pill? Xiaohua slowly organized them. When he saw the 4 bottles, he couldn't help but be stunned. Then joy climbed up his brows. There's also a foundation establishment pill? The last jade bottle really made Xiaohua go crazy. He really didn't expect that the unremarkable Yongshang would have so many precious pills in his hands. He even had the legendary foundation establishment pill. Yongshang must have prepared these pills for a long time. He wanted to use them when he had a breakthrough in his cultivation. He said he wanted to, but he left with regrets. How sad. Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh inwardly. If he didn't participate in this treasure hunt, with these marrow-cleansing pills and the pills he would use to build his foundation in the future, Yongshang's future would be boundless. But now fate has made a fool of us. Chapter 1363. As Xiaohua lamented Yongshang's bitter experience, he was about to put away the marrow-cleansing pills and foundation establishment pills. However, at this moment, Xiaohua suddenly froze. His mouth revealed a bitter smile as he inwardly thought. Just now, I was still talking about Yongshang. Look at me, I already have the marrow-cleansing pill in my hands, yet I still want to use it in the future. While searching for treasures, I need to increase my cultivation. If I don't take it now, when I encounter danger in the Yulian Mountains and need magic power in the next few days, wouldn't the heavens and earth be unable to help me? Thinking this, Xiaohua looked at the people nearby who were all closing their eyes and adjusting their breathing. He put a marrow-cleansing pill into his mouth. The marrow-cleansing pill melted as soon as it entered his mouth, turning into liquid that flowed into his abdomen. Soon after, it was absorbed by Xiaohua's meridians. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He began to circulate the cultivation method of the second layer of the qi refining realm, and began to refine the marrow-cleansing pill's medicinal power. Just as Xiaohua was concentrating on cultivating, the reverse light within the space stopped as usual. An indescribable fluctuation began to surge. At the same time, the starlight in the sky shone down, wrapping Xiaohua in the center. After about 4 hours, Xiaohua finished refining the marrow-cleansing pill. After carefully inspecting it, he found that his cultivation had indeed made some progress. Moreover, the effect was much better than the marrow-cleansing pill he obtained from the auction in Jinghua City. It was comparable to more than 4 months of bitter cultivation. And fortunately it was useful. It seems that the marrow-cleansing pill from before was refined from spirit herbs that were too young. Yongshang's 3 jade bottles contained 30 marrow-cleansing pills. According to my previous experience, it should be comparable to 10 years of bitter cultivation. I used nearly 12 years of bitter cultivation to advance from the first layer of the qi refining realm to the second layer of the qi refining realm. I don't know how many years it will take to advance from the second layer of the qi refining realm to the third layer of the qi refining realm. Xiaohua inwardly calculated. 30 essence cleansing pills. This isn't a small number. Even Shang Huaming couldn't gather that many pills in the past. I wonder how Yongshang got his hands on them. Xiaohua thought about some useless things before popping another essence cleansing pill into his mouth. The night quickly passed. Perhaps it was because they had been in a hurry the day before. Or perhaps it was because they had just experienced a life and death escape. But Li Xiaowen and the others did not immediately get up in the morning. It was only when the sun was high in the sky that they got up and removed the warning talismans. Over the course of the night, Xiaohua had taken 4 marrow cleansing pills in one go, which was equivalent to 2 years of bitter cultivation. The progress of his cultivation was quite obvious. However, for an ordinary cultivator, 2 years might be enough to raise their cultivation from the second layer to the third layer, but for Xiaohua, it was still somewhat insufficient. Even when Li Xiaowen and the others looked at Xiaohua, the corners of their brows slightly raised. They were too lazy to even show a trace of astonishment. Fellow Taoists, are you ready? Li Xiaowen finished tidying up and asked softly. If there's nothing else, we'll be leaving. We still have to travel for a day, so I'm afraid we won't have much time to rest. Everyone nodded and followed Li Xiaowen as they continued to fly in the direction of Yulian Mountains. Xiao Hua was still the last. After last night's bitter cultivation, his cultivation had improved a lot. Magic power flowed through his entire body like mercury flowing down the ground, very smooth. Under the urging of his magic power, the flying talisman also displayed a greater effect. Xiao Hua's flying speed was also much faster than before. Right now, I'm only at the second layer of qi refining, but my flying speed is comparable to that of an 11th layer qi refining cultivator. What if I cultivate to the 11th layer? Then how fast could the flying speed be? Wouldn't it be comparable to that of a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator? Then even if this young master can't beat them, I can still escape. Xiao Hua secretly laughed as he flew. Xiao Hua's thoughts were quite beautiful. If he calculated like this, wouldn't his flying speed be comparable to that of a nascent soul cultivator when he reached foundation establishment? When he reached the legendary Great Ascension stage, wouldn't his flying speed be comparable to that of an immortal? 4 days in a row, Xiao Hua and the others flew during the day and cultivated at night. Other people didn't say anything, but Xiao Hua's cultivation increased bit by bit. He hadn't even used half of the 30 marrow cleansing pills he obtained from Yongshang. Yet he actually reached the middle stage of the second layer of qi refining. One day, the 5 of them were flying to the left of a mountain forest when they saw a cultivator in the 7th layer of qi refining flying diagonally in front of them. During the past 4 days, Xiao Hua and the others had been flying through rather remote areas. If they weren't flying through ravines, they were flying through deep mountains and swamps. It was rare for them to encounter other cultivators. Now that they saw this cultivator, they were slightly startled. They secretly slowed down and respectfully waited for the cultivator to pass. The cultivator glanced at them, then ignored them and continued on his way. After the cultivator left, the 5 of them flew up again. Originally, it was normal for them to encounter other cultivators, but in the next few hours, Xiao Hua and the others met one after another. There were qi refining cultivators, foundation establishment cultivators, and so on. Xiao Hua wasn't the only one who found this strange. Li Xiaowen and the others were also puzzled. In the end, when several cultivators in the 5th layer of qi refining like them passed by, Li Xiaowen stepped forward and blocked them. He very politely asked about the reason. The result made Xiao Hua and the others very happy. About 2 hours to the left of Xiao Hua and the others, there was a small bazaar tomorrow. Once those cultivators left, Li Xiaowen and the others stopped flying. Fellow Taoists, although we prepared a lot of things, we also used up a lot of them in the southern color plane, especially the fire-type yellow talismans. Even though we've already used them up, if we can go to the bazaar to replenish them, it'll be beneficial at that time. I want to go take a look. What do you think, fellow Taoists? Everyone was also happy to hear this. They stopped flying forward and looked for a quiet place to cultivate. On the morning of the second day, they determined the direction and directly flew to the bazaar. The bazaar was quite famous. It was called Fengjiu because there was a cultivator family with the surname Feng. When Xiao Hua and the others arrived at Fengjiu, the sun had already risen. Many cultivators who received the news also rushed to the bazaar. Therefore, although Xiao Hua and the others didn't know the exact location, they still found it by following others. The bazaar wasn't located in the small town called Fengjiu. Instead, it was located in a valley 50 kilometers southeast of the small town. The valley's entrance had a restriction commonly used in the cultivation world. It was used to distinguish the identity of cultivators. It was similar to the restriction used in the western part of Jingbua City. Xiao Hua and the others were naturally able to enter without any hindrance. After entering the valley, there were quite a few cultivators strolling around leisurely. There were also quite a few cultivators who placed their items on the ground and sat down cross-legged, waiting for others to come forward to trade. Although the valley looked a bit messy, the noise was much quieter, making it feel very peaceful. Seniors, are you here to participate in Fengjiu's bazaar? A young cultivator with delicate features and a cultivation around the 3rd layer of qi condensation stood at the entrance of the valley. When he saw Xiao Hua and the others enter, he very respectfully stepped forward and saluted. Yes, may I ask if there are any special rules? Li Xiaowen asked with a smile. Junior is a disciple of the Feng clan. My name is Discipline Hall. Senior, thank you for coming to participate in the e-bazaar. Discipline Hall smiled and said, My Feng clan's e-bazaar is the same as other bazaars. There are no special rules. Seniors only need to hand over 10 low-grade spirit stones. Oh, 10 low-grade spirit stones. Li Xiaowen nodded. That's not a lot. As he spoke, he took out a mid-grade spirit stone from his storage pouch and handed it over. This is for the 5 of us. I'll leave the rest for you. Thank you, Senior. The disciple seemed to be very happy. He thanked him and said, Do you need Junior to accompany seniors around? No need. I'll take a look for myself. Fellow Taoists, go ahead. Yes. Discipline Hall said. He cupped his hands and left to greet the other cultivators. Fellow Taoists, we don't have too much time. This valley's e-bazaar isn't very large. 4 hours should be enough for us to replenish our yellow talismans. Li Xiaowen roughly looked around the valley and said to everyone, We'll go our own ways. When the time comes, we'll come back here and meet up. Everyone nodded and went in different directions. Xiaohua thought for a moment, turned around and walked in front of Discipline Hall. He cupped his hands and asked, Fellow Taoist Feng, I have a matter to ask. Oh, please speak, fellow Taoist. Discipline Hall looked at Xiaohua's cultivation and didn't have any intention of neglecting him. Excuse me, fellow Taoist, in the valley's e-bazaar, are there any medicinal pills that can increase one's cultivation? Xiaohua asked in a low voice. This Discipline Hall had an awkward expression. He smiled apologetically and said, Fellow Taoist is giving I a difficult problem. Inside the valley's e-bazaar, there are fellow Taoists from all over the world. They can place their things anywhere they want. I don't know where those medicinal pills are. Xiaohua smiled and took out a mid-grade spirit stone from his storage pouch. He handed it over and said, Fellow Taoist Feng is on duty here, so you must have some information. If you can tell me, I'll be very grateful. Seeing the mid-grade spirit stone, Discipline Hall's eyes brightened. He took it, looked around and said, Medicinal pills that can increase cultivation are rare in the state of Xi. Let alone my Feng clan's e-bazaar. I'm afraid they're not common even in Jinghua City's e-bazaar. Xiaohua had a smile on his face and didn't say anything. He knew that since Discipline Hall dared to take the spirit stone, there must be some unknown information. Sure enough, Discipline Hall took out a summoning talisman from his storage pouch and handed it over, saying, Fellow Taoist, please take this summoning talisman and send it out in 2 hours. I still have an errand here. Once I'm done, I'll help you contact them. However, fellow Taoist, do you have enough spirit stones or items to exchange? Xiaohua had just received Yongshang's storage pouch and was rich and overbearing. He rubbed his nose and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Feng, don't worry. I definitely won't disappoint you. If I'm satisfied, I'll be extra grateful to fellow Taoist Feng. Well said, well said. Discipline Hall smiled and cupped his hands. Sure enough, Wind Station's e-bazaar couldn't compare to Jinghua City's e-bazaar. Not to mention that there weren't many items, even the quality of the items was much lower. Moreover, e-bazaar's items were generally low and mid-grade spirit stones. High-grade spirit stones were extremely rare. Seeing this situation, Xiaohua realized that it wasn't because the spirit stones in e-bazaar had depreciated, nor was it because Jinghua City's items were too expensive. Instead, it was because Jinghua City's e-bazaar was one of the most famous e-bazaars in the state of Xi. At that level of e-bazaar or e-bazaar, mid-grade spirit stones were only the lowest grade spirit stones. Chapter 1364. The Feng clan's e-bazaar really didn't have anything outstanding. It wasn't on the same level as Jinghua City. However, Xiaohua didn't need any finished products. After buying a lot of low-grade talisman paper and talisman ink, he didn't have anything else to buy. Soon after, he held his hands and slowly strolled around while waiting for 2 hours to pass. And what is this? Xiaohua strolled around for a long time. He stood here and squatted there, appearing extremely leisurely. However, when he arrived in front of a small stall, his eyes were immediately attracted by a pitch-black stick that was about a foot long. The stick was thrown to the side of the stall. There were some messy things on the stall that looked very ordinary. Xiaohua wasn't in a hurry to go forward. He only quietly stood at a place with a bit more people. He seemed to be negotiating with others, but his eyes would occasionally glance at the stall. The owner of the stall was a sturdy middle-aged man. He had a square face and rough skin. He didn't look like a cultivator at all. It seemed that the items in the man's stall were not attractive at all. Almost everyone looked around casually and did not stop at all. Even if there were a few people who stopped and looked at the items in the stall, they would leave before they could stand still. As for the middle-aged man, his face was filled with obvious anxiety. From time to time he would reach out his hand, wanting to greet people, but in the end, not a single word came out of his mouth. After looking for a moment, Xiaohua had an idea in his mind. He slowly walked to the stall of the middle-aged cultivator. Seeing Xiaohua stop in front of his stall, the cultivator's face revealed a happy expression. He rubbed his hands together, looking very excited. However, the cultivator still didn't say anything. He only looked at Xiaohua with a fervent gaze and pointed at his stall with his hand. Xiaohua frowned and thought to himself, could it be he's a mute? He looked for a moment and picked up a palm-sized brown object that he had just seen. He smiled and said, fellow Taoist, what is this? The middle-aged cultivator opened his mouth, and his face turned red. He finally said, This is a lump of black gold. This is used for refining mid-grade materials. Oh, so it's a stutterer. Xiaohua suddenly realized. No wonder he had to greet him. After the cultivator finished speaking, he let out a long breath and the redness on his face faded a bit. He looked at Xiaohua's calm expression and continued, This thing. If fellow Taoist wants it, please take out three mid-grade spirit stones. The cultivator spoke with great effort and Xiaohua also listened with great effort. After he finished speaking, Xiaohua pointed at the things next to him and said, Are these all used for refining? Are they all common prices? Yes. When the middle-aged cultivator heard this, he nodded his head vigorously. There weren't many cultivators who came to Feng Clan's e-bazaar, and those who knew how to refine were even fewer. His materials weren't particularly good, so no one came to him to trade. Now listening to Xiaohua's tone, it seemed he also didn't know too much. Although he didn't know if Xiaohua really wanted to buy it or not, he was still happy that someone came to take a look. Xiaohua put down the black gold in his hand and picked up another piece. He looked at it while thinking. Looking at this cultivator's rough appearance, he must be a disciple of some small sect that knew how to refine qi. Although he didn't understand these materials for refining, it didn't mean he wouldn't have a use for them in the future. Anyway, he had a lot of spirit stones in his space, so there was no harm in buying some. Thinking, Xiaohua casually asked, What about this piece? What is it? This also doesn't know. Presumably because Xiaohua asked something he didn't know. The man's stuttering became even more serious. He only raised his finger and said, One mid-grade spirit stone. After he finished speaking, he actually wiped the sweat off his forehead with his hand. Xiaohua almost wanted to cover his mouth and laugh, but he still managed to hold himself back. He nodded and said, Since that's the case, I'll buy some. Good. The middle-aged cultivator was overjoyed. He rubbed his hands and said, I wonder, which one does fellow Taoist want? These Xiaohua calculated in his mind, and with a swipe of his hand, he actually managed to swipe the majority of the things on the middle-aged cultivator's stall. This much. The middle-aged cultivator stuttered. Yes. Xiaohua nodded, then casually pointed at the pitch-black stick and casually asked, Is this also used for refining? The middle-aged cultivator squatted down and gathered the materials that Xiaohua had just pulled out. His mouth was wide open as he calculated how many spirit stones these materials were worth. When he heard Xiaohua's words, he looked at the rod that Xiaohua was pointing at and said, No, it's When Xiaohua heard this, His eyes became even brighter. He said with a slightly trembling voice, Can you sell it to I? Sell? No, not selling. The middle-aged cultivator didn't even raise his head, and said without hesitation. Xiaohua's heart turned cold. He was about to raise the price when the cultivator said, Fellow Taoist, if you're curious, as long as can take it, I'll gift it to you. The last sentence seemed to have been said with courage, and it was said very quickly. Aha! Xiaohua's heart bloomed with joy. He reached out and picked up the black stick. Although the stick was extremely heavy, it didn't seem to be too strenuous in Xiaohua's hands. Fellow Taoist, has good strength. The middle-aged cultivator was somewhat flabbergasted. Then I will take it, Xiaohua said without any trace of politeness. Please, the middle-aged cultivator was also quite straightforward. He waved his hand and said, That thing. I don't know what it is. It's in a mountain stream. I picked it up. Fellow Taoist, these materials total 70, 80 middle grade spirit stones. Okay. Xiaohua looked left and right. Seeing that no one was paying attention, he waved his hand and put the black stick into his space. Then he put all the materials on the ground into his storage pouch and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist, where is your storage pouch? I will give you the spirit stones. The middle-aged cultivator hurriedly untied his storage pouch. When Xiaohua put the 78 middle-grade spirit stones into his storage pouch, the stone in his heart finally fell to the ground. He almost couldn't believe that this little cultivator, who was only at the second level of qi refining, could take out so many spirit stones and buy so many refining materials. Fellow Taoist, the middle-aged cultivator looked left and right and said in a low voice, Buy so many materials, do it a few times. Xiaohua praised in his heart and said with a smile, I will tell you. Many thanks for pointing it out, fellow Taoist. However, I am not alone. There is still a master from my sect here. Oh, the middle-aged cultivator suddenly understood. He immediately nodded and said with a smile, I have thought too much. Soon after, Xiaohua didn't stay any longer. He cupped his hands and left. As he walked, he put the tip of the devil spear together with the pitch-black stick. Sure enough, the crack at the bottom of the tip of the devil spear matched the crack of the stick perfectly. I knew it. Just now this crack looked very familiar. Sure enough, it was like this. Xiaohua was very happy in his heart. It was because of this guess that he went to the stall to buy those refining materials. And after he knew the weight of this stick, he was even more certain that this was definitely a devil tool. It's just that, from the looks of it, this devil tool is still incomplete. The back of the stick is still cut off. Xiaohua looked at the crack at the back of the stick and said thoughtfully, I don't know whose work this is. To actually be able to cut this hard devil tool into several pieces. Even if I managed to use this magic tool, how would I be able to completely restore it? Soon after, Xiaohua looked at the pile of refining materials that he just bought and thought to himself, could it be that I still need to practice refining? This devil tool is an item of the devil world. The refining methods of the cultivation world might not necessarily work. Besides, why would I restore this devil tool? It's fine as long as there's a spear tip that can be used. Xiaohua immediately came to a realization and thought to himself with a bitter smile. After looking for a while, Xiaohua estimated that it was about time and walked towards the entrance of the valley. Sure enough, at this time, there weren't many people entering the valley. There was only a young disciple standing there, bored to death, looking all around. Xiaohua saw that the disciplinary wind mansion wasn't there, so he didn't walk forward. He walked to a slightly secluded place and took out the communication talisman. Using his magic power, the communication talisman turned into a ray of light and unexpectedly flew into the stone wall to the side. Not long after, he saw the disciplinary wind mansion suddenly appear from the corner of the stone wall in the distance. After looking left and right, he walked straight toward Xiaohua. Fellow Taoist Feng, how is it? Xiaohua waited for the disciplinary wind mansion to come closer and cupped his hands with a smile. I'm afraid it's a bit troublesome, the disciplinary wind mansion said with a slight frown. Xiaohua stared blankly and his heart turned cold. He said in a low voice, I hope fellow Taoist Feng can explain. The disciplinary Wind Mansion looked left and right and said in a low voice, Fellow Taoist, please follow I. Xiaohua followed the disciplinary Wind Mansion to the side of the stone wall and said in a low voice, I won't hide it from fellow Taoist. I know a few loose cultivators. They always have some rare goods. As for the origin of these goods, I naturally won't ask too much. It's not convenient for them to come to my Feng clan's e-bazaar. Every time, they entrust e-bazaar to my martial uncle to bring them to sell on consignment. This is because my martial uncle had something to do a few days ago, and left this matter to I to handle. As for the medicinal pills fellow Taoist mentioned, they always take out a little bit each time. Therefore, I saw fellow Taoist's eagerness to get medicine and agreed. Could it be there aren't any medicinal pills this time? Xiaohua asked curiously. It's just outside of fellow Taoist's expectations. The disciplinary Wind Mansion shook his head and said, It's not that there aren't any this time. It's just that there are too many. Ah, too many? Xiaohua felt a burst of joy. However, he still didn't understand. Since there are some, why does fellow Taoist say it's troublesome? The disciplinary Wind Mansion smiled wryly. It's because their requirements are rather harsh. That's strange. What's so harsh about it? Fellow Taoist, please dispel my confusion. Xiaohua cupped his hands and said. Chapter 1365. Everyone is familiar with Little Dot as the group leader. Harass him more, in order to make up for the mistake of being the third flower. This is the second update. Then, I'll be honest with fellow Taoist. Feng Fu sighed and said, There are 3 types of medicinal pills this time. One is the marrow cleansing pill, one is the Peiyuan pill, and the last is the clear breeze pill. I don't know the specific number. I only know that the most effective Peiyuan pill has the least amount, while the marrow cleansing pill and the clear breeze pill have the most amount. Because the amount of medicinal pills is a bit too many, they made 2 requests. Which 2? Xiaohua knew that his anxiety was definitely unfavorable to him. However, he still couldn't help but say it. The first is, if they're going to buy them, then they'll buy them all together. They don't want more people to know about this. Feng Fu looked at Xiaohua and said in a low voice, But with so many medicinal pills, who can eat them all? Sure enough, Xiaohua also frowned slightly. It wasn't that he didn't have spirit stones, but the problem was that if he bought them all, wouldn't that be inviting trouble onto himself? What's the second? Xiaohua asked again. The second is even more outrageous. They requested to not trade in my Feng clan's e-bazaar. Impossible. Xiaohua heard and immediately shook his head like a rattledrum. That's right. Feng Fu also said in a low voice. They should be trading in my Feng clan's e-bazaar. If they go out, who can guarantee fellow Taoist's safety? They're breaking the rules. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said in a low voice. Fellow Taoist Feng, I have a question. Why don't they keep these medicinal pills for themselves? From fellow Taoist's words, they have so many medicinal pills and can take some out every time. If they take them for themselves, wouldn't they be able to reach the 10th layer of qi refining? Fellow Taoist, this question is rather strange. Feng Fu looked at Xiaohua somewhat strangely. Fellow Taoist, could it be that you can't increase your cultivation because your realm isn't high enough? It's true that medicinal pills can increase one's magic power, but if one's cultivation isn't high enough, no matter how many medicinal pills one takes, it still won't increase one's cultivation. I have seen a lot of cultivators like you who want to break through the bottleneck with the help of medicine. You don't have to doubt I. No, fellow Taoist misunderstands. What I mean is that those loose cultivators can use medicinal power to forcefully break through like I did. Xiaohua hurriedly explained. Fellow Taoist, you're wrong again. How do you know that they haven't tried this before? The disciplinary officer smiled and said. It's precisely because they tried it with fellow Taoist before that they didn't place their hopes on medicinal pills. And I understand. It's because They have no hope in the medicinal pill aspect that they're unscrupulously searching for other avenues. Xiaohua silently nodded and also sighed. I don't know if I sigh, let's not talk about it. I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist Feng to tell them that I agree to the first condition, and let them state a price. If possible, I will take out the corresponding items or spirit stones. However, the second condition is absolutely out of the question. The disciplinary officer glanced at Xiaohua thoughtfully and said with a smile, All right, I'll go tell them now. I hope they'll bring good news to fellow Taoist. I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist Feng. Xiaohua cupped his hands in thanks. After the disciplinary officer left with quick steps, Xiaohua slightly narrowed his eyes and stared at his back. It was unknown what he was thinking. The disciplinary officer was quite fast. In the time it took to smoke a cigarette, he returned. Behind him was a cultivator wearing camouflage robes. Seeing that the other party was wearing camouflage robes, Xiaohua's heart stirred and he inwardly said, Could it be fellow Taoist? I've made you wait for a long time. The disciplinary officer welcomed him with a face full of smiles and said with a smile, Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. When this senior heard how straightforward fellow Taoist was, he was also moved, so he also took a step back. Xiaohua nodded and cupped his hands towards the cultivator behind him, saying, Greetings, fellow Taoist. Well said. That cultivator's voice was hoarse, and had already been disguised by the camouflage robes. Urgently, that cultivator looked left and right. He took out a silence talisman, and used it to block out the surrounding sounds. Then he said in a low voice, I heard from fellow Taoist Feng that fellow Taoist has the ability to buy olive eyes medicinal pills, but I don't believe it. How many spirit stones does fellow Taoist have? Where are fellow Taoist's medicinal pills? And how many spirit stones are they worth? Xiaohua remained unmoved and asked back. I have 10 Peiyuan pill, 30 marrow cleansing pills, and 50 clear pleasure pills in this storage pouch. That cultivator patted the storage pouch at his waist and said, I won't say too much about the market prices of the Peiyuan pill, marrow cleansing pill, and clear pleasure pill. Peiyuan pill costs 15 mid-grade spirit stones, marrow cleansing pill costs 5 mid-grade spirit stones, and clear pleasure pill costs 3 mid-grade spirit stones. Fellow Taoist has to pay a total of 450 mid-grade spirit stones. Fellow Taoist, this price is indeed expensive. Xiaohua said with a smile. 3 vitality-absorbing fruits and 3 black tusks can refine 10 Peiyuan pill. 3 vitality-absorbing fruits and 3 black tusks are only 6 mid-grade spirit stones. That's all. Fellow Taoist, this Peiyuan pill costs a total of 15 mid-grade spirit stones? Fellow Taoist, how can spiritual plants be compared to medicinal pills? Especially the Peiyuan pill that can increase one's power? That cultivator sneered. What I said is the real price. If it wasn't for I having some misgivings, I would have directly put it up for sale in this e.g. Fellow Taoist, don't forget that things like the Peiyuan pill have always been auctioned. And that's fine. Xiaohua nodded. He knew. Previously he bid for a marrow cleansing pill at Jinghua City's e.g. market and spent 10 mid-grade spirit stones. At this time, this rogue cultivator offered a price of 5 mid-grade spirit stones, which really wasn't expensive. Thus he said with a smile, I already bought it, why don't you offer a few more spirit stones? Fellow Taoist, you should know that these are all exchanged with my life. If fellow Taoist is 1 less spirit stone, I definitely won't sell it. That cultivator said very decisively. Fine. Xiaohua thought for a moment, stretched out his hand and said, I want to see if this medicinal pill is real or fake. To tell the truth, Xiaohua had never seen so many medicinal pills appear in this e.g. market for so long, so he felt a bit uneasy. Fellow Taoist, you still haven't taken out your spirit stones, right? The cultivator didn't hand over his storage pouch. And here they are. Xiaohua took off his storage pouch, but he didn't hand it over to the cultivator. Instead, he handed it over to the discipline hall and said, Fellow Taoist Feng, take a look. Is the amount of spirit stones inside correct? The discipline hall glanced at the cultivator and took Xiaohua's storage pouch. He roughly looked at it and said with a smile, Senior, you should know that this fellow Taoist storage pouch indeed has enough spirit stones. Good. The cultivator heard this and very quickly handed over the storage pouch. Xiaohua patiently inspected it, and found that it was indeed a genuine medicinal pill. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. After changing the contents of the storage pouch, he handed the spirit stones back to the cultivator, and said with a smile, "Deal. Fellow Taoist, please check the spirit stones." After the cultivator checked, he nodded and said with a smile, "I didn't think that I would meet someone as generous as fellow Taoist at the Feng Clan's EG market. Nice to meet you." After he finished speaking, he cupped his hands, and was about to leave. At this time, Xiaohua's heart suddenly stirred and he hastily yelled, "Fellow Taoist, please wait." "What? Does fellow Taoist still have something to say?" The cultivator turned his head and looked at Xiaohua and the discipline hall in confusion. Xiaohua muttered to himself for a moment, and looked at the discipline hall. He also said, "This. Fellow Taoist, I have a matter. I don't know if I can ask you directly. What does fellow Taoist want to ask?" The cultivator vigilantly asked. It's nothing. Fellow Taoist is overthinking." Xiaohua knew what he was thinking and promptly explained, "I want to ask fellow Taoist, do you have any pill recipes or pill refinement methods?" Seeing this cultivator take out so many medicinal pills all of a sudden, Xiaohua immediately thought of pill recipes when he thought about what the discipline hall said earlier. The cultivator's expression couldn't be seen due to the mist, but his tone was very hesitant. Xiaohua struck while the iron was hot and said, "These things don't have any use for fellow Taoist, and they might even attract some trouble. Why don't you transfer them to me? I will give fellow Taoist a satisfactory price." When the discipline hall beside them heard this, he was also slightly stunned. He opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. The cultivator pondered for a moment and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, you really have a big tone. Pill recipes above EG are hard to find. One pill recipe costs more than 500 high-grade spirit stones. Yet fellow Taoist actually, then." The cultivator turned his head and said to the discipline hall, "I want to speak with this fellow Taoist alone. I ask fellow Taoist Feng to leave for a moment." All right. The discipline hall smiled wryly and turned to leave. After the discipline hall left, the cultivator took out several books from his sleeve, and held them in his hand. He said, "I won't hide it from fellow Taoist. I indeed obtained 5 pill recipes. However, I'm not proficient in alchemy, and I don't understand the things inside. If fellow Taoist sincerely wants them, each of these 5 pill recipes will cost 800 high-grade spirit stones, for a total of 4 supreme-grade spirit stones. I want to take a look first." Xiaohua's heart was beating wildly, and he felt somewhat thirsty. "No." The cultivator shook his head and said, "Once you see these pill recipes, perhaps fellow Taoist will know where they came from. If fellow Taoist doesn't want them, what will happen to I? I can't take this risk. If fellow Taoist believes in I, then hurry up and give me the spirit stones." Xiaohua looked at his face, which couldn't be seen clearly under the mist. He clenched his teeth and said, "All right, I believe you." As he said this, he handed over the storage pouch in his sleeve. Fellow Taoist, is there a mistake? This storage pouch is empty." The cultivator looked at the empty storage pouch and felt very strange. Xiaohua's expression gradually calmed down, and he said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, take a look at this storage pouch. It was specially made by the 7 Skills sect, and it costs 10 supreme-grade spirit stones. I didn't bring that many supreme-grade spirit stones. If fellow Taoist thinks it's suitable, I can exchange this storage pouch for the pill recipes. Fellow Taoist storage pouch is really quite a lot." The cultivator glanced at the storage pouch on Xiaohua's waist, then carefully inspected the storage pouch in his hand. Seeing the cultivator inspecting it, Xiaohua couldn't help but feel his heart beating faster. This was the storage pouch he got from the spirit husbandry sect disciple. The space inside was much larger than Yongshang's, and was about the same as the one he extorted from the market. Since that one could be exchanged for a few supreme-grade spirit stones, then this one could also be exchanged. Sure enough, the cultivator looked at it and nodded. Fellow Taoist's storage pouch is much better than I's. It should be worth a few supreme-grade spirit stones. Then, fellow Taoist, are you willing to exchange? Xiao Hua's heart couldn't help but beat faster. Chapter 1366. Everyone is familiar with Xiao Dian as the group leader. Please harass him, in order to make up for the mistake of being the third flower. This is the third update. That cultivator still used his hoarse voice to say, "Why not? I happen to be lacking such a big storage pouch." However, the 7 Possibilities sect is as shady as the Feng clan. One storage pouch costs 10 top-grade spirit stones. I really don't want to part with it. Since fellow Taoists gave me your storage pouch today, it means that we are fated to meet. Why not trade? The cultivator put away the storage pouch in his sleeve and handed over the 5 small booklets. Xiao Hua took them and resisted the urge to open them and put them into his storage pouch. All right, fellow Taoist, I's harvest today is quite bountiful, far surpassing my expectations. Farewell. That cultivator cupped his hands and smiled. Moreover, I didn't expect that fellow Taoist, with your mid-stage second-layer qi refining cultivation, would actually tsk. That cultivator didn't finish his sentence and left. What's the meaning of this? Xiao Hua was slightly surprised. This time, he had thrown caution to the wind and wanted to take the risk to get the pill recipes. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of the risks involved. The 7 Possibilities sect is as shady as the Feng clan? Just now, Xiao Hua was immersed in the joy of obtaining the pill recipes. Now that he thought about it, he immediately woke up. Of course, the Discipline Hall was a disciple of the Feng clan. It wasn't a big deal for him to buy the Peiyuan pill, but the pill recipes, those were things that even cultivation sects coveted. How could a small cultivation clan not covet them? As for why that cultivator didn't sell the pill recipes to the Feng clan, it might be because he had just obtained them recently and hadn't met any martial uncle from the Discipline Hall. Or maybe the Feng clan knew that the origin of this cultivator's pill recipes was unknown and wasn't willing to pay a high price. If the Feng clan didn't know that the pill recipes were given to him, then it would be fine. But since they knew, how could they let it go? The Discipline Hall was also a disciple of the Feng clan. They wouldn't turn their elbows to him. When he thought up to here, Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel regret for his rash actions. But if he hadn't taken the risk, would he have been able to obtain these pill formulas? Xiao Hua understood and immediately walked towards the entrance of the valley. At this time, there was still more than an hour before the appointed time with Li Xiaowen. However, when Xiao Hua came to the entrance of the valley, he was overjoyed. The 4 people were standing there and chatting. Thinking about it, these people were all strolling around Jingbua City's e.g. How could they care about the Feng clan's e.g.? After restocking up on materials and yellow talismans, they lost their desire to wander around and returned to the entrance of the valley. Seeing that Xiao Hua had unexpectedly returned ahead of time, Li Xiaowen smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, you're the last one to return. Did you gain anything?" "Hee, it's all right. I bought some fireball talismans, but they aren't as good as the ones I bought before." Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Since all the fellow Taoists are here, let's leave in advance. It's not appropriate to stay here for too long." As Xiao Hua spoke, his eyes slightly glanced at the Feng clan disciple standing not far away. That Feng clan disciple clearly didn't pay attention to them. At this time, many cultivators had already left the valley. Xiao Hua's group wasn't the first group. Everyone nodded and stepped out of the valley. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea after Xiao Hua's group left, 2 cultivators around the 6th layer of qi refining hurriedly walked out from a corner of the valley. Behind them was the pale-faced Discipline Hall disciple. When the 2 arrived at the entrance of the valley, they immediately questioned the disciple on duty. That disciple was very surprised. After listening, he easily recalled the tall Xiao Hua. When they heard that Xiao Hua's group had just left, the 2 of them fiercely glared at the Discipline Hall disciple and chased after them from inside the valley. The Discipline Hall disciple's face was filled with panic. He didn't forget to fiercely glare at the disciple on duty and hurriedly chased after them. On the contrary, the disciple who was innocently glared at had a puzzled expression. He strangely looked at the discipline hall disciples back and helplessly shrugged. When Xiao Hua's group left the valley, there were also Feng clan disciples on duty outside. However, they didn't stop them from leaving. If Xiao Hua was alone, he would definitely want to cover it up, and definitely wouldn't directly fly towards the Yulian Mountains. However, Li Xiaowen's group didn't know this and directly flew towards the direction. Xiao Hua couldn't explain it clearly and could only follow behind them. Li Xiaowen's group didn't fly very fast, and even seemed to be somewhat leisurely. Xiao Hua was impatient as he watched from behind. He unconsciously increased his speed and caught up to Li Xiaowen. He said, "Fellow Taoist Li, we don't have much time left. Can you fly a bit faster?" "Fly a bit faster?" Li Xiaowen stared blankly for a moment before coming to a realization. He glanced at Xiao Hua and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, I know your cultivation has advanced by leaps and bounds. You're already in the middle of the second layer of qi refining. In addition, your flying speed should be quite a bit faster. However, the Yulian Mountains ahead is a place even more dangerous than the southern colored plains. If we don't conserve our energy, how can we safely pass through it?" These words immediately pushed Xiao Hua back. It was as if Xiao Hua was urging everyone to fly, because he wanted to show off. Fellow Taoist Li, it's like this. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, and still felt that he should roughly explain the situation. However, at this moment, a sneer came from behind him. "Fellow Taoist in front, could you please wait? This is bad." When Xiao Hua heard this, his heart skipped a beat. He turned around and sure enough, there were two cultivators wearing clothes similar to the ones from the discipline hall. "Fellow Taoists, what's the matter?" When Li Xiaowen's group saw the Feng clan disciples, their hearts trembled and they became vigilant. Li Xiaowen stopped and cupped his hands. "What's the matter?" A slightly taller and plump Feng clan disciple glanced at Xiao Hua and turned his head to ask, "Did you just come from the Feng clan's trade fair?" "That's right. What business does fellow Taoist have with us?" Li Xiaowen asked again. "This fellow Taoist. What's his relationship with you fellow Taoists?" The other thin disciple pointed at Xiao Hua and asked straightforwardly. Li Xiaowen slightly frowned and cupped his hands. "This is fellow Taoist Xiao, who has been forsaken by the heavens. What business does fellow Taoist have with us?" "Forsaken by the heavens?" The disciple from before also frowned, inwardly regretting. "If I knew it was forsaken by the heavens, I wouldn't have come with just two people. If a few more people came, we could have caught all of these loose cultivators in one fell swoop. But now, it's a bit difficult." Soon after, this disciple slightly leaned to the side, wanting to see if the discipline hall disciples chasing after them had caught up. If it was just the three of them, they should still have some assurance. Li Xiaowen and the others were loose cultivators, so how could they not know the dangers involved? Seeing the 6th level qi condensation disciple of the Feng clan catch up without even explaining the reason, Li Xiaowen sneered and said, "My heaven-forsaken members shouldn't cause trouble, but we're also not afraid of trouble. Fellow Taoist, what business do you have with us? If there's nothing urgent, I and the others still have to hurry on. Farewell." As he spoke, he flung his sleeve and was about to leave. "Wait." The slightly fat disciple of the Feng clan became anxious. He pointed at Xiao Hua and said, "You can leave, but he can't." "Fellow Taoist, why can't I leave?" Xiao Hua sneered. Because you stole something from my Feng clan." The slightly fat disciple's eyes turned and he hurriedly said, "Haha." Xiao Hua laughed loudly and said, "I only stayed in the Valley of Yi for 2 hours. How could I steal something from your Feng clan? Fellow Taoist, you're really slandering me. Hehe, whether you stole or not, you know clearly in your heart. We're too lazy to argue with you. You only need to follow us back to Feng Station. Naturally, my Feng clan's ancestor will deal with you." The slightly thin disciple went with the flow and said, "Even if you're a disciple of one of the 3 great cultivation sects in our country of Xi, you should still come to my Feng clan to explain. Not to mention that you're a member of Heaven Forsaken. If my Feng clan made a mistake, we should give Heaven Forsaken an explanation." At this time, Li Xiaowen also seemed to have thought of Xiao Hua's abnormal behavior just now. He whispered, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, What's going on? Did you take something from the Feng clan or not? Xiaohua glanced at Li Xiaowen and said with a smile. I only stayed in EG for 2 hours with fellow Taoist. Does fellow Taoist think that I have the ability to steal something from the Feng clan? Fellow Taoists, I'm afraid you've misunderstood. Li Xiaowen cupped his hands and said. This fellow Taoist has a shallow cultivation. How could he take something from the Feng clan? Could it be that only people with high cultivation can steal things? It's precisely this kind of shallow rogue cultivator that likes to take other people's things the most. Then, fellow Taoist, what did fellow Taoist Xiao take from the Feng clan? Li Xiaowen asked curiously. It's not convenient for I to tell fellow Taoist. I ask fellow Taoist Xiao to return with I. If fellow Taoists are not at ease, you can also follow along. What if I don't return with you? Xiaohua sneered. Don't return? That's not up to you. The slightly shorter disciple sneered. Then he glanced back again. Seeing this, Li Xiaowen's heart trembled. He already felt that the situation was critical. He hurriedly said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, if you took other people's things, it's better to return them as soon as possible. Just now, I already said that I, heaven forsaken, am not afraid of causing trouble. But I also never take the initiative to cause trouble. If fellow Taoist makes any mistakes, I, heaven forsaken, will not protect you. Fellow Taoist Li, do you believe I? Or do you believe the Feng clan? Xiaohua asked coldly. I naturally believe the truth. Li Xiaowen said anxiously. If fellow Taoist Xiao took it, then quickly take it out and give it to them. Apologize and compensate them a bit. They might not let fellow Taoist Xiao go. Moreover, fellow Taoist Xiao, do you think our matters are more important, or that you took other people's things? Just as he said this, the people from the discipline hall caught up from afar. Their shadows could already be seen. The slightly fatter disciple had been paying attention all along. Now that he saw them, he sneered and said, Since that's the case, then come to my Feng clan as guests. After saying this, the two of them glanced at each other. Then they quickly surrounded the 5 people from the left and right. Not good, let's go. Seeing this, Li Xiaowen and the others were greatly alarmed. They urged the magic power they had long since stored up, and their figures swiftly flew in different directions like lightning. Only Xiaohua was not in a hurry. He looked for a direction where no one was going and flew over at a leisurely pace. Chapter 1367. Seeing this, the 2 disciples of the Feng family were overjoyed. They both abandoned the others and chased after Xiaohua. Their target was Xiaohua. Even if Li Xiaowen and the others ran away, they wouldn't care too much. Not to mention capturing Xiaohua. It would be easy to label him as a thief. Even if they killed Xiaohua, would their Feng family be afraid of the heavens? You brat, why haven't you surrendered yet? The 2 disciples chased while shouting proudly. But after chasing for a while, the 2 felt that something was wrong. Xiaohua was only at the 2nd level of qi refining. How could he fly faster than them? The 2 had already pushed their magic power to the maximum, but there was still a certain distance between them and Xiaohua. They couldn't get close. Could it be the 2 disciples looked at each other and saw the astonishment on each other's faces? Seeing this, Xiaohua knew that he had found an opportunity. He immediately stopped flying, turned around, and quickly flew towards the 2. His speed was actually much faster than before. This is bad, we've been tricked. The 2 disciples were shocked, but at the same time, they were bewildered. They couldn't figure out how they were tricked by this 2nd-level qi refining cultivator. Around them, there clearly wasn't anyone lying in ambush. Just as the 2 were hesitating, they took out yellow talismans from their storage pouches and wanted to use their magic power. They heard Xiaohua sneer. I'll let you see this young master's power. As soon as his voice fell, the 2 saw Xiaohua's hands shoot out in succession. In a short moment, a large expanse of gradually enlarging fireballs came down from above their heads and all around them. Fireball talisman? Seeing Xiaohua's fireball talisman, the 2 let out a sigh of relief and sneered in their hearts. This kind of low-level fireball talisman, no matter how many there were, wouldn't pose a real threat to a 6th-level chi refining cultivator. As such, the two of them didn't care too much about it. They slapped their storage pouches and took out several water curtain talismans. With a flash of magic power, several extremely thick water curtains appeared above the two of them, blocking the fireball talismans from below. However, something unforgettable happened. Just as the water curtain was formed, the fireball at the front hit the water curtain. With a loud bang, the fireball immediately blasted a large hole in the water curtain created by the middle-grade water curtain talisman. Immediately after, there was a series of rumbling sounds. Just as the water curtain was about to collapse, a few more fireball talismans exploded. These exploding fireball talismans actually caused the entire water curtain to disappear without a trace. Supreme-grade fireball talisman? Both of their eyes were filled with confusion. How can a rogue cultivator have so many of them? However, the two of them immediately realized that this guy in front of them was the one who had bought the pill formulas. How could he be lacking in spirit stones? In the instant after the numerous water curtains were destroyed, the numerous fireballs began to close in on them. They frequently exploded around the two of them. Intense explosions, scorching air currents, and the fireballs that did not reach their bodies forced the two of them into a fluster. They did not know how to deal with the situation. Flames also splashed in all directions, making it impossible for them to clearly see the situation around them. With a loud bang, an enormous fireball exploded above the two of them. All of a sudden, the two of them's hair was blown away. The flames spread in all directions, and even their Taoist robes were about to ignite. Fortunately, the two of them had already placed Vajra talismans on their bodies, so they were not injured. However, even so, the enormous heat wave still caused the two of them to tumble a few times, and they directly fell down from midair. Hee, this guy is really a rogue cultivator. He only knows how to throw fireballs above our heads and in all directions. He doesn't know how to set up defenses below us. If he could also throw a few fireball talismans here, wouldn't we have to bear the consequences? The slightly shorter disciple stabilized his body and smiled as he spoke to the slightly taller disciple. The slightly taller disciple raised his eyebrows. Without waiting for him to speak, his expression immediately changed and he urgently said, "Junior brother, be careful." Be careful? That cultivator immediately looked left and right, but did not discover the slightest abnormality. When he saw that his senior brother's gaze was looking downwards, he was startled in his heart and promptly lowered his head. Sure enough, just a foot below him, Xiaohua was holding a spear in his hand and was rapidly thrusting towards the sole of his foot. Impudent! That cultivator loudly roared, and an icicle talisman was casually created, thrusting towards the top of Xiaohua's head. This icicle talisman was much larger than the one Xiaohua used before. Moreover, as the icicle talisman flew through the air, it faintly emitted a zhi sound, which was a sign of vigorous magic power activation. As expected of a 6th-level chi refining cultivator, the strength of this magic power, the control of this magic power, and the use of yellow talismans are all far beyond what I can compare to. I'm afraid that my iron cloak talisman will be destroyed by this low-level icicle talisman. Xiaohua saw that the icicle talisman was casually thrusted towards him like a real icicle talisman, and he secretly praised in his heart. Sure enough, the icicle talisman used by a 6th-level chi refining cultivator was several times more powerful than Xiaohua's own icicle talisman. Xiaohua's iron cloak talisman was only able to resist for a moment, and after a flash of brilliance, it was destroyed by the icicle talisman. Xiaohua tilted his head, and with a poo sound, the icicle talisman pierced Xiaohua's shoulder. However, even though Xiaohua was pierced by the icicle talisman, he didn't stop in the slightest. At the same time, the devil's spear in his hand pierced that cultivator's leg. Although that cultivator also had a Vajra talisman on his body, which was newly formed after being destroyed by the fireball talisman, when the devil's spear pierced through, the Vajra talisman's brilliance actually faintly flashed, and the devil's spear pierced a bowl-sized hole in it. Afterwards, the devil's spear didn't stop in the slightest, and at almost the same instant that the icicle talisman pierced Xiaohua's shoulder, the devil's spear also pierced that cultivator's leg. Ouch! The sharp pain transmitted from his leg made that cultivator faintly cry out. But his cry didn't spread for long before that cultivator's body immediately fell from midair, like a piece of stone. All of this happened in the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint. The other cultivator only had time to shout, "Junior Marshal Brother," before everything was over. Xiao Hua immediately turned around, and only a few strands of blood flowed out from his shoulder. Xiao Hua was too lazy to pay attention to it, and with a wave of his devil spear, he once again rushed towards that cultivator. Seeing Xiao Hua rush over, that cultivator's heart trembled for no reason, and a trace of fear actually appeared on his face. It was as if Xiao Hua was a 6th-layer qi refining cultivator, and he himself was only a 2nd-layer qi refining cultivator. "Hand over your life," Xiao Hua shouted as he rushed closer. That cultivator anxiously waved his hand, and similarly, a pile of fireball talismans was thrown out, wanting to block in front of Xiao Hua. "Ha ha ha, you actually dare to play with fire in front of this young master." Xiao Hua sneered, and with a wave of his hand, he also threw out a pile of fireball talismans. At the same time that the fireball talismans were thrown out, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up, as if he had thought of something. The corners of his mouth faintly rose, and with another stretch of his hand, he also took out a dozen or so confinement talismans. With a wave of his hand, he activated them with magic power, and scattered them into the rumbling fireballs. The fireballs exploded one by one. Not only did the flowing fire scatter, but even the confinement talismans that had been activated were thrown into disarray by the qi waves, and rapidly flew in all directions without any pattern. If it was a normal confinement talisman, this 6th-layer qi refining cultivator would have many ways to avoid it. However, under the influence of the qi waves from many different directions, the confinement talismans that Xiao Hua had just scattered suddenly appeared near the cultivator. That cultivator did his best to avoid them, but in the end he still couldn't escape. One of the confinement talismans hidden in the fireball talismans was stuck directly in front of his chest. With a whoosh, this cultivator, like his junior martial brother, rapidly fell down. Xiao Hua also dodged a confinement talisman that had exploded in front of him, and quickly chased after this cultivator with the devil spear in hand. This cultivator was hit by the confinement talisman, and his body was tightly bound. No matter how he struggled, he couldn't break free in the slightest. He could only watch helplessly as Xiao Hua flew closer and extended the devil spear, easily piercing his chest. "Martial uncles, martial uncles," the voice of the pursuing cultivator from the discipline hall echoed in the air. In his eyes, for 2 6th-layer qi refining martial uncles to catch a 2nd-layer qi refining brat like Xiao Hua was as easy as lifting a hand. That's why he wasn't worried in the slightest as he headed towards this area where sparks were flying. However, before he could clearly see the situation, a gust of wind came from behind him. He only had enough time to turn his head, and all he saw was a black spear tip that suddenly enlarged in front of his eyes. Soon after, he felt pain on his face, and he lost consciousness. That spear tip was the only thing the cultivator from the discipline hall saw before he died. As for the owner of the spear tip, even the dead cultivator from the discipline hall absolutely didn't believe it was Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua withdrew the spear tip, and coldly looked at the corpses of the cultivator from the discipline hall. He didn't have any pity in his heart. Soon after, he flew to the ground and took the storage pouches of the 3 cultivators. He threw everything into the space, and stuffed the empty storage pouches into his sleeves. Finally, he used a fireball talisman to destroy the 3 corpses. Only then did he fly into the air, find the possible direction of Li Xiaowen and the others, and chase after them. Compared to Xiao Hua, Li Xiaowen, Fan Daomao, Fu Shu, and Sun Fian were even more shameful. When they saw the Feng clan's disciples surround them from both sides, they immediately flew away. Moreover, they very tacitly flew in all directions and didn't gather in one place. At this time, how could they still have Tian Qi's style of facing a common enemy? When they flew far away like stray dogs, they finally realized that the target of the Feng clan's people was Xiao Hua. They didn't seem to put Tian Qi in their eyes and didn't care about Tian Qi's so-called revenge. They didn't have any intention of silencing all of them. And it was just that they didn't have any absolute intention of doing so. Soon after, Several people gathered in the direction of Yulian Mountains and gathered together at the foot of a towering mountain. Alas, fellow Taoists, our luck isn't good. Fan Daomao sighed and said, when I saw fellow Taoist Ma send Xiaohua to our group that day outside of Jinghua City, I felt that something was wrong. Sure enough, you see, what kind of trouble did he cause? Even going to the Feng clan's EG could attract the Feng clan's disciples. You said that you bought something good and quietly took it away. Why did it have to be seen by the Feng clan? However, this poor Taoist is quite curious. Xiaohua, what kind of treasure did he get that actually made the Feng clan disregard their face, and not afraid of spreading the news of EG to the cultivation world? Sun Fian said thoughtfully. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.